Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 161. Vyasa said, on hearing these words of her afflicted parents, the daughter was filled with grief, and she addressed them, saying, "Why are you so afflicted, and why do you so weep, as if you have none to look after you? Oh, listen to me, and do what may be proper. There is little doubt that you are bound in duty to abandon me at a certain time. Sure to abandon me once, oh, abandon me now and save everything at the expense of me alone." Men desire to have children, thinking that children would save them, in this world as well as in the region hereafter. Oh, cross the stream of your difficulties by means of my poor self, as if I were a raft. A child rescueth his parents in this and the other regions, therefore is the child called by the learned putra, rescuer. The ancestors desire daughters' sons from me, as a special means of salvation. But, without waiting for my children, I myself will rescue them by protecting the life of my father. This my brother is of tender years, so there is little doubt that he will perish if thou deest now. If thou, my father, deest and my brother followeth thee, the funeral cake of the Pitris will be suspended and they will be greatly injured. Left behind by my father and brother, and by my mother also, for she will not survive her husband and son, I shall be plunged deeper and deeper in woe and ultimately perish in great distress. There can be little doubt that if thou escape from this danger as also my mother and infant brother, then thy race and the ancestral cake will be perpetuated. The son is one's own self, the wife is one's friend, the daughter, however, is the source of trouble. Do thou save thyself, therefore, by removing that source of trouble, and do thou thereby set me in the path of virtue. As I am a girl, O father, destitute of thee, I shall be helpless and plunged in woe, and shall have to go everywhere. It is therefore that I am resolved to rescue my father's race and share the merit of that act by accomplishing this difficult task. If thou, O best of Brahmanas, goest thither, unto the Rakshasa, leaving me here, then I shall be very much pained. Therefore, O father, be kind to me. O thou best of men, for our sake, for that of virtue and also thy race, save thyself, abandoning me, whom at one time thou shalt be constrained to part from. There need be no delay, O father, in doing that which is inevitable. What can be more painful than that? When thou hast ascended to heaven, we shall have to go about begging our food, like dogs, from strangers. But if thou art rescued with thy relations from these difficulties, I shall then live happily in the region of the celestials. It hath been heard by us that if after bestowing thy daughter in this way, thou offerest oblations to the gods and the celestials, they will certainly be propitious. Vyasa continued, the Brahmana and his wife, hearing these various lamentations of their daughter, became sadder than before, and the three began to weep together. Their son, then, of tender years, beholding them and their daughter thus weeping together, lisped these words in a sweet tone, his eyes having dilated with delight, "Weep not, O father, nor thou, O mother, nor thou, O sister." And smilingly did the child approach each of them, and at last taking up a blade of grass said in glee, "With this will I slay the Rakshasa who eateth human beings." Although all of them had been plunged in woe, yet hearing what the child lisped so sweetly, joy appeared on their faces. Then Kunti, thinking that to be the proper opportunity, approached the group and said these words. Indeed, her words revived them as nectar reviveth a person that is dead. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 162. Kunti said, I desire to learn from you the cause of this grief, for I will remove it, if possible. The Brahmana replied, O thou of ascetic wealth, thy speech is, indeed, worthy of thee. But this grief is incapable of being removed by any human being. Not far from this town, there liveth a Rakshasa of the name of Vaka, which cannibal is the lord of this country and town. Thriving on human flesh, that wretched Rakshasa endued with great strength ruleth this country. He being the chief of the Asuras, this town and the country in which it is situate are protected by his might. We have no fear from the machinations of any enemy, or indeed from any living soul. The fee, however, fixed for that cannibal is his food, which consists of a cartload of rice, 2 buffaloes, and a human being who conveyeth them unto him. One after another, the householders have to send him this food. The turn, however, cometh to a particular family at intervals of many long years. If there are any that seek to avoid it, the Rakshasa slayeth them with their children and wives, and devoureth them all. There is, in this country, a city called Vetrakia, where liveth the king of these territories. He is ignorant of the science of government, and possessed of little intelligence. He adopts not with care any measure by which these territories may be rendered safe for all time to come. But we certainly deserve it all, inasmuch as we live within the dominion of that wretched and weak monarch in perpetual anxiety. Brahmanas can never be made to dwell permanently within the dominions of any one, for they are dependent on nobody. They live rather like birds ranging all countries in perfect freedom. It hath been said that one must secure a good king, then a wife, and then wealth. It is by the acquisition of these three that one can rescue his relatives and sons. But as regards the acquisition of these three, the course of my actions hath been the reverse. Hence, plunged into a sea of danger, am suffering sorely. That turn, destructive of one's family, hath now devolved upon me. I shall have to give unto the Rakshasa as his fee the food of the aforesaid description, and one human being to boot. I have no wealth to buy a man with. I cannot by any means consent to part with any one of my family, nor do I see any way of escape from the clutches of that Rakshasa. I am now sunk in an ocean of grief from which there is no escape. I shall go to that Rakshasa today, attended by all my family, in order that that wretch might devour us all at once. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 163. Kunti said, Grieve not at all, O Brahmana, on account of this danger. I see a way by which to rescue thee from that Rakshasa. Thou hast only one son, who, besides, is of very tender years, also only one daughter, young and helpless, so I do not like that any of these, or thy wife, or even thyself should go unto the Rakshasa. I have 5 sons, O Brahmana, let one of them go, carrying in thy behalf tribute of that Rakshasa. Hearing this, the Brahmana replied, To save my own life I shall never suffer this to be done. I shall never sacrifice, to save myself, the life of a Brahmana or of a guest. Indeed, even those that are of low origin and of sinful practices refuse to do what thou askest me to do. It is said that one should sacrifice one's self and one's offspring for the benefit of a Brahmana. I regard this advice excellent, and I like to follow it too. When I have to choose between the death of a Brahmana and that of my own, I would prefer the latter. The killing of a Brahmana is the highest sin, and there is no expiation for it. I think a reluctant sacrifice of one's own self is better than the reluctant sacrifice of a Brahmana. O blessed lady, in sacrificing myself I do not become guilty of self-destruction. No sin can attach to me when another will take my life. But if I deliberately consent to the death of a Brahmana, it would be a cruel and sinful act, from the consequence of which there is no escape. The learned have said that the abandonment of one who hath come to thy house or sought thy protection, as also the killing of one who seeketh death at thy hands, is both cruel and sinful. The illustrious among those conversant with practices allowable in seasons of distress have before now said that one should never perform an act that is cruel and censurable. It is well for me that I should today perish myself with my wife, but I would never sanction the death of a Brahmana. Kunti said, I too am firmly of opinion, O Brahmana, that Brahmanas should ever be protected. As regards myself, no son of mine would be less dear to me even if I had 100 instead of the 5 I have. But this Rakshasa will not be able to kill my son, for that son of mine is endued with great prowess and energy, and skilled in mantras. He will faithfully deliver to the Rakshasa his food, but will, I know to a certainty, rescue himself. I have seen before many mighty Rakshasas of huge bodies engaged in combat with my heroic son and killed 2 by him. But, O Brahmana, do not disclose this fact to anybody, for if it be known, persons desirous of obtaining this power will, from curiosity, always trouble my sons. The wise have said that if my son imparteth any knowledge, without the assent of his preceptor, unto any person, my son himself will no longer be able to profit by that knowledge. Thus addressed by Pritha, the Brahmana with his wife became exceedingly glad and assented to Kunti's speech, which was unto them as nectar. Then Kunti, accompanied by the Brahmana, went unto the son of Vayu, Bhima, and asked him to accomplish that difficult task. Bhima replied unto them, saying, So be it. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 164. Vyasa said, after Bhima had pledged himself to accomplish the task, saying, I will do it, the Pandavas, O Bharata, returned home with the alms they had obtained during the day. Then Yudhishthira, the son of Pandu, from Bhima's countenance alone, suspected the nature of the task he had undertaken to accomplish. Sitting by the side of his mother, Yudhishthira asked her in private, What is the task, O mother, that Bhima of terrible prowess seeketh to accomplish? Doth he do so at thy command or of his own accord? Kunti replied, Bhima, that chastiser of foes, will at my command do this great deed for the good of the Brahmana and the liberation of this town. Yudhishthira said, What rash act hast thou done, O mother? It is difficult of being performed and almost amounteth to suicide. The learned never applaud the abandonment of one's own child. Why dost thou, O mother, wish to sacrifice thy own child for the sake of another's? Thou hast, O mother, by this abandonment of thy child, acted not only against the course of human practices, but also against the teachings of the Vedas, that Bhima, relying on whose arms we sleep happily in the night and hope to recover the kingdom of which we have been deprived by the covetous son of Dhritarashtra, that hero of immeasurable energy, remembering whose prowess Duryodhana and Sakuni do not sleep a wink during the whole night, and by whose prowess we were rescued from the palace of lack and various other dangers, that Bhima who caused the death of Purusharthas, and relying on whose might we regard ourselves as having already slain the sons of Dhritarashtra and acquired the whole earth with all her wealth, upon what considerations, O mother, hast thou resolved upon abandoning him? Hast thou been deprived of thy reason? Hath thy understanding been clouded by the calamities thou hast undergone? On hearing these words of her son, Kunti said, O Yudhishthira, thou needst not be at all anxious on account of Vrikottara. I have not come to this resolve owing to any weakness of understanding. Respected by him, and with our sorrows assuaged, we have, O son, been living in the house of this Brahmana, unknown to the sons of Dhritarashtra. For requiting, O son, that Brahmana, I have resolved to do this. He, indeed, is a man upon whom good offices are never lost. The measure of his requital becometh greater than the measure of the services he receiveth. Beholding the prowess of Bhima on the occasion of our escape from the house of lack, and from the destruction also of Hidimva, my confidence in Vrikottara is great. The might of Bhima's arms is equal unto that of 10,000 elephants. It was, therefore, that he succeeded in carrying you all, each heavy as an elephant, from Varanavada. There is no one on earth equal unto Bhima in might. He may even overcome that foremost of warriors, the holder of the thunderbolt himself. Soon after his birth he fell from my lap on the breast of the mountain. By the weight of his body the mass of stone on which he fell down broke in pieces. From this also, O son of Pandu, I have come to know Bhima's might. For this reason have I resolved to set him against the Brahmana's foe. I have not acted in this from foolishness or ignorance or from motive of gain. I have deliberately resolved to do this virtuous deed. By this act, O Yudhishthira, two objects will be accomplished. One is a requital of the services rendered by the Brahmana, and the other is the acquisition of high religious merit. It is my conviction that the Kshatriya who rendereth help unto a Brahmana in anything acquireth regions of bliss hereafter. So also a Kshatriya who saveth the life of a Kshatriya achieveth that great fame in this world as in the other. A Kshatriya rendering help unto a Vaishya also on this earth certainly acquires worldwide popularity. One of the kingly tribe should protect even the Sudra who cometh to him for protection. If he doeth so, in his next life he receiveth his birth in a royal line, commanding prosperity and the respect of other kings. O scion of Puru's race, the illustrious Vyasa of wisdom acquired by hard ascetic toil told me so in bygone days. It is therefore that I have resolved upon accomplishing this. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 165. Having heard these words of his mother, Yudhishthira said, What thou, O mother, hast deliberately done, moved by compassion for the afflicted Brahmana, is, indeed, excellent. Bhima will certainly come back with life, after having slain the cannibal, inasmuch as thou art, O mother, always compassionate unto Brahmanas. But tell the Brahmana, O mother, that he doth not do anything whereby the dwellers in this town may know all about it, and make him promise to keep thy request. Vyasa continued, Then, when the night passed away, Bhimasena, the son of Pandu, taking with him the Rakshasa's food, set out for the place where the cannibal lived. The mighty son of Pandu, approaching the forest where the Rakshasa dwelt, began to eat himself the food he carried, calling loudly to the Rakshasa by name. The Rakshasa, inflamed with anger at Bhima's words, came out and approached the place where Bhima was. Of huge body and great strength, of red eyes, red beard, and red hair, he was terrible to behold, and he came, pressing deep the earth with his tread. The opening of his mouth was from ear to ear, and his ears themselves were straight as arrows. Of grim visage, he had a forehead furrowed into 3 lines. Beholding Bhima eating his food, the Rakshasa advanced, biting his nether lip and expanding his eyes in wrath. And addressing Bhima he said, Who is this fool, who desiring to go to the abode of Yama, eateth in my very sight the food intended for me? Hearing these words, Bhima, O Bharata, smiled in derision and disregarding the Rakshasa, continued eating with averted face. Beholding this, the cannibal uttered a frightful yell and with both arms upraised ran at Bhima desiring to kill him, there and then. Even then, disregarding the Rakshasa and casting only a single glance at him, Vrkotara, that slayer of hostile heroes, continued to eat the Rakshsa's food. Filled with wrath at this, the Rakshasa struck, from behind with both his arms, a heavy blow on the back of Vrkotara, the son of Kunti. But Bhima, though struck heavily by the mighty Rakshasa, with both his hands, did not even look up at the Rakshasa but continued to eat as before. Then the mighty Rakshasa, inflamed with wrath, tore up a tree and ran at Bhima for striking him again. Meanwhile the mighty Bhima, that bull among men, had leisurely eaten up the whole of that food and washing himself stood cheerfully for fight. Then, O Bharata, possessed of great energy, Bhima, smiling in derision, caught with his left hand the tree hurled at him by the Rakshasa in wrath. Then that mighty Rakshasa, tearing up many more trees, hurled them at Bhima, and the Pandava also hurled as many at the Rakshasa. Then, O king, the combat with trees between that human being and the Rakshasa became so terrible that the region around soon became destitute of trees. Then the Rakshasa, saying that he was none else than Vaka, sprang upon the Pandava and seized the mighty Bhima with his arms. That mighty hero, also clasping with his own strong arms the strong-armed Rakshasa, and exerting himself actively, began to drag him violently. Dragged by Bhima and dragging Bhima also, the cannibal was overcome with great fatigue. The earth began to tremble in consequence of the strength they both exerted, and large trees that stood there broke in pieces. Then Bhima, beholding the cannibal overcome with fatigue, pressed him down on the earth with his knees and began to strike him with great force. Then placing one knee on the middle of the Rakshsa's back, Bhima seized his neck with his right hand and the cloth on his waist with his left, and bent him double with great force. The cannibal then roared frightfully. And, O monarch, he also began to vomit blood while he was being thus broken on Bhima's knee. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 166. Vyasa said, Then Vaka, huge as a mountain, thus broken, on Bhima's knee, died, uttering frightful yells. Terrified by these sounds, the relatives of that Rakshasa came out, O king, with their attendants. Bhima, that foremost of smiters, seeing them so terrified and deprived of reason, comforted them and made them promise to give up cannibalism, saying, Do not ever again kill human beings. If ye kill men, ye will have to die even as Vaka. Those Rakshasas, hearing this speech of Bhima, said, So be it, and gave, O king, the desired promise. From that day, O Bharata, the Rakshasas of the region were seen by the inhabitants of that town to be very peaceful towards mankind. Then Bhima, dragging the lifeless cannibal, placed him at one of the gates of the town and went away unobserved by any one. The kinsmen of Vaka, beholding him slain by the might of Bhima, became frightened and fled in different directions. Meanwhile Bhima, having slain the Rakshasa, returned to the Brahmana's abode and related to Yudhishthira all that had happened, in detail. The next morning the inhabitants of the town in coming out saw the Rakshasa lying dead on the ground, his body covered with blood. Beholding that terrible cannibal, huge as a mountain cliff, thus mangled and lying on the ground, the hair of the spectators stood erect. Returning to Ekachakra, they soon gave the intelligence. Then, O king, the citizens by thousands, accompanied by their wives, young and old, all began to come to the spot for beholding the Vaka, and they were all amazed at seeing that superhuman feat. Instantly, O monarch, they began to pray to their gods. Then they began to calculate whose turn it had been the day before to carry food to the Rakshasa. And ascertaining this, they all came to that Brahmana and asked him, to satisfy their curiosity. Thus asked by them repeatedly, that bull among Brahmanas, desirous of concealing the Pandavas, said these words unto all the citizens: a certain high-souled Brahmana, skilled in mantras, beheld me weeping with my relatives after I had been ordered to supply the Rakshasas food. Asking me the cause and ascertaining the distress of the town, that first of Brahmanas gave me every assurance and with smiles said, I shall carry the food for that wretched Rakshasa today. Do not fear for me. Saying this, he conveyed the food towards the forest of Vaka. This deed, so beneficial unto us all, hath very certainly been done by him. Then those Brahmanas and Kshatriyas of the city, hearing this, wondered much. And the Vaishyas and the Sudras also became exceedingly glad, and they all established a festival in which the worship of Brahmanas was the principal ceremony, in remembrance of this Brahmana who had relieved them from their fears of Vaka. Chaitrartha Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 167. After this, citizens returned to their respective houses, and the Pandavas continued to dwell in Ekachakra as before. Janamejaya said, O Brahmana, what did those tigers among men, the Pandavas, do after they had slain the Rakshasa Vaka? Vyasa said, the Pandavas, O king, after slaying the Rakshasa Vaka, continued to dwell in the abode of that Brahmana, employed in the study of the Vedas. Within a few days there came a Brahmana of rigid vows unto the abode of their host to take up his quarters there. Their host, that bull among Brahmanas, ever hospitable unto all guests, worshipping the newly arrived Brahmana with due ceremonies, gave him quarters in his own abode. Then those bulls among men, the Pandavas, with their mother Kunti, solicited the new lodger to narrate to them his interesting experiences. The Brahmana spake to them of various countries and shrines, and holy rivers, of kings and many wonderful provinces and cities. And after this narration was over, that Brahmana, O Janamejaya, also spoke of the wonderful self-choice of Yajnasena's daughter, the princes of Panchala, and of the births of Drishtadyumna and Sikandi, and of the birth, without the intervention of a woman, of Krishna, Draupadi, at the great sacrifice of Drupada. Then those bulls among men, the Pandavas, hearing of these extraordinary facts regarding that illustrious monarch, Drupada, and desiring to know the details thereof, asked the Brahmana, after his narration was concluded, to satisfy their curiosity. The Pandavas said, How, O Brahmana, did the birth of Drishtadyumna the son of Drupada take place from the sacrificial fire? How also did the extraordinary birth of Krishna take place from the center of the sacrificial platform? How also did Drupada's son learn all weapons from the great bowman Drona? And, O Brahmana, how and for whom and for what reason was the friendship between Drona and Drupada broken off? Vyasa continued, thus questioned, O monarch, by those bulls among men, the Brahmana narrated all the particulars about the birth of Draupadi. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 168. The Brahmana said, At that region where the Ganga entered the plains there lived a great rishi, devoted to the austerest of penances. Of rigid vows and great wisdom, he bore the name Bharadvaja. One day, on coming to the Ganga to perform his ablutions, the rishi saw the Apsara Gratachi, who had come before, standing on the bank after her ablutions were over. And it so happened that a wind arose and disrobed the Apsara standing there. And the rishi, beholding her thus disrobed, felt the influence of desire. Though practicing the vow of continence from his very youth, as soon as he felt the influence of desire, the rishi's vital fluid came out. And as it came out, he held it in a pot, Drena, and of that fluid thus preserved in a pot was born a son who came to be called Drona, the pot-born. And Drona studied all the Vedas and their several branches. And Bharadvaja had a friend named Prashada who was the king of Panchalas. And about the time that Drona was born, Purusharthas also obtained a son named Drupada. And that bull amongst Kshatriyas, Purusharthas' son, going every day to that asylum of Bharadvaja, played and studied with Drona. And after Purusharthas' death, Drupada succeeded him on the throne. Drona about this time heard that the great Brahmana hero, Rama, on the eve of his retiring into the weeds, was resolved to give away all his wealth. Hearing this, the son of Bharadvaja repaired unto Rama, who was about to retire into the woods, and addressing him, said, O best of Brahmanas, know me to be Drona, who hath come to thee to obtain thy wealth. Rama replied, saying, I have given away everything. All that I now have is this body of mine and my weapons. O Brahmana, thou mayest ask of me one of these two, either my body or my weapons. Then Drona said, It behoveth thee, sir, to give me all thy weapons together with the mysteries of their use and withdrawal. The Brahmana continued, Then Rama of Bhrigu's race, saying, So be it, gave all his weapons unto Drona, who obtaining them regarded himself as crowned with success. Drona, obtaining from Rama the most exalted of all weapons, called the Brahma weapon, became exceedingly glad and acquired a decided superiority over all men. Then the son of Bharadvaja, endued with great prowess, went to King Drupada, and approaching that monarch, that tiger among men, said, Know me for thy friend. Hearing this, Drupada said, One of low birth can never be the friend of one whose lineage is pure, nor can one who is not a car warrior have a car warrior for his friend. So also one who is not a king cannot have a king as his friend. Why dost thou, therefore, desire to revive our former friendship? The Brahmana continued, Drona, gifted with great intelligence, was extremely mortified at this, and settling in his mind some means of humiliating the king of the Panchala, he went to the capital of the Kurus, called after the name of an elephant. Then Bhishma, taking with him his grandsons, presented them unto the wise son of Bharadvaja as his pupils for instruction, along with various kinds of wealth. Then Drona, desirous of humiliating King Drupada, called together his disciples and addressed them, Ye sinless ones, it behoveth you, after you have been accomplished in arms, to give me as preceptorial fee something that I cherish in my heart. Then Arjuna and others said unto their preceptor, So be it. After a time, when the Pandavas became skilled in arms and sure aims, demanding of them his fee, he again told them these words, Drupada, the son of Purusharthas, is the king of Kshatravati. Take away from him his kingdom, and give it unto me. Then the Pandavas, defeating Drupada in battle and taking him prisoner along with his ministers, offered him unto Drona, who, beholding the vanquished monarch, said, O king, I again solicit thy friendship, and because none who is not a king deserveth to be the friend of a king, therefore, O Yajnasena, I am resolved to divide thy kingdom amongst ourselves. While thou art the king of the country to the south of Bhaguthi, Ganga, I will rule the country to the north. The Brahmana continued, the king of the Panchalas, thus addressed by the wise son of Bharadvaja, told that best of Brahmanas and foremost of all persons conversant with weapons, these words, O high-souled son of Bharadvaja, blessed be thou, let it be so, let there be eternal friendship between us as thou desirest. Thus addressing each other and establishing a permanent bond between themselves, Drona and the king of Panchala, both of them chastisers of foes, went away to the places they came from. But the thought of that humiliation did not leave the king's mind for a single moment. Sad at heart, the king began to waste away. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 169. The Brahmana continued, King Drupada, after this, distressed at heart, wandered among many asylums of Brahmanas in search of superior Brahmanas well-skilled in sacrificial rites. Overwhelmed with grief and eagerly yearning for children, the king always said, Oh, I have no offspring surpassing all in accomplishments. And the monarch, from great despondency, always said, Oh, fie on those children that I have and on my relatives. And ever thinking of revenging himself on Drona, the monarch sighed incessantly. And that best of kings, O Bharata, even after much deliberation, saw no way of overcoming, by his Kshatriya might, the prowess and discipline and training and accomplishment of Drona. Wandering along the banks of the Yamuna and the Ganga, the monarch once came upon a sacred asylum of Brahmanas. There was in that asylum no Brahmana who was not a Snataka, no one who was not of rigid vows, and none who was not virtuous to a high degree. And the king saw there 2 Brahmana sages named Yaja and Upayaja, both of rigid vows and souls, under complete control and belonging to the most superior order. They were both devoted to the study of the ancient institutes and sprung from the race of Kasyapa. And those best of Brahmanas were well able to help the king in the attainment of his object. The king then, with great assiduity and singleness of purpose, began to court this pair of excellent Brahmanas. Ascertaining the superior accomplishments of the younger of the 2, the king courted in private Upayaja of rigid vows, by the offer of every desirable acquisition. Employed in paying homage to the feet of Upayaja, always addressing in sweet words and offering him every object of human desire, Drupada, after worshipping that Brahmana, addressed him one day, saying, O Upayaja, O Brahmana, if thou performest those sacrificial rites by virtue of which I may obtain a son who may slay Drona, I promise thee 10,000 kine, or whatever else may be agreeable to thee. O first of Brahmanas, truly am I ready to make gifts to thee. Thus addressed by the king, the rishi replied, saying, I cannot perform such rites. But Drupada, without accepting this reply as final, once more began to serve and pay homage unto that Brahmana. Then, after the expiration of a year, Upayaja, that first of Brahmanas, O monarch, addressing Drupada in sweet tone, said, My elder brother, Yaja, one day, while wandering through the deep woods, took up a fruit that had fallen upon a spot the purity of which he cared not to inquire about. I was following him at the time, and observed this unworthy act of his. Indeed, he entertains no scruples in accepting things impure. In accepting that particular fruit he saw not any impropriety of sinful nature. Indeed, he who observeth not purity in one instance is not very likely to observe it in the other instances. When he lived in the house of his preceptor, employed in studying the institutes, he always used to eat impure remnants of other people's feasts. He always speaks approvingly of food and entertains no dislike for anything. Arguing from these, I believe that my brother covets earthly acquisitions. Therefore, O king, go unto him, he will perform spiritual offices for thee. Hearing these words of Upayaja, King Drupada, though entertaining a low opinion of Yaja, nevertheless went to his abode. Worshipping Yaja, who was, still, worthy of homage, Drupada said unto him, O master, perform thou spiritual offices for me, and I will give thee 80,000 kine. Enmity with Drona burneth my heart, it behoveth thee therefore to cool that heart of mine. Foremost of those conversant with the Vedas, Drona is also skilled in the Brahma weapon, and for this, Drona hath overcome me in a contest arising from impaired friendship. Gifted with great intelligence, the son of Bharadvaja is, now, the chief preceptor of the Kurus. There is no Kshatriya in this world superior to him. His bow is full 6 cubits long and looks formidable, and his shafts are capable of slaying every living being. That great bowman, the high-souled son of Bharadvaja, habited as a Brahmana, is destroying the Kshatriya power all over the earth. Indeed, he is like a second Jamadagnya intended for the extermination of the Kshatriya race. There is no man on earth who can overcome the terrible force of his weapons. Like a blazing fire fed with clarified butter, Drona, possessed of Brahma might and uniting it with Kshatriya might, consumeth every antagonist in battle. But thy Brahma force is greater in itself than Drona's Brahma force united with Kshatriya might. Therefore, as I am inferior to Drona, in consequence of my possession of Kshatriya might alone, I solicit the aid of thy Brahma force, having obtained thee so superior to Drona in knowledge of Brahma. O Yaja, perform that sacrifice by means of which I may obtain a son invincible in battle and capable of slaying Drona. Ready am I to give thee 10,000 kine. Hearing these words of Drupada, Yaja said, So be it. Yaja then began to recollect the various ceremonies appertaining to the particular sacrifice. And knowing the affair to be a very grave one, he asked the assistance of Upayaja, who coveted nothing. Then Yaja promised to perform the sacrifice for the destruction of Drona. Then the great ascetic Upayaja spoke unto King Drupada of everything required for the grand sacrifice, by aid of fire, from which the king was to obtain offspring. And he said, O king, a child shall be born unto thee, endued, as thou desirest, with great prowess, great energy, and great strength. The Brahmana continued, Then King Drupada, impelled by the desire of obtaining a son who was to slay Drona, began, for the success of his wish, to make the necessary preparations. And when everything was complete, Yaja, after having poured libations of clarified butter on the sacrificial fire, commanded Drupada's queen, saying, Come hither, O queen, O daughter-in-law of Prashada. A son and a daughter have arrived for thee. Hearing this, the queen said, O Brahmana, my mouth is yet filled with saffron and other perfumed things. My body also beareth many sweet scents. I am hardly fit for accepting the sanctified butter which is to give me offspring. Wait for me a little, O Yaja. Wait for that happy consummation. Yaja, however, replied, O lady, whether thou comest or waitest, why should not the object of this sacrifice be accomplished when the oblation hath already been prepared by me and sanctified by Upayaja's invocations? The Brahmana continued, having said this, Yaja poured the sanctified libation on the fire, whereupon arose from those flames a child resembling a celestial who, possessing the effulgence of fire, was terrible to behold. With a crown on his head and his body encased in excellent armor, sword in hand, and bearing a bow and arrows, he frequently sent forth loud roars. And immediately after his birth, he ascended an excellent chariot and went about in it for some time. Then the Panchalas in great joy shouted, Excellent, excellent. The very earth seemed at that time unable to bear the weight of the Panchalas mad with joy. Then, marvelous to say, the voice of some invisible spirit in the sky said, This prince hath been born for the destruction of Drona. He shall dispel all the fears of the Panchalas and spread their fame. He shall also remove the sorrow of the king. And there arose, after this from the center of the sacrificial platform, a daughter also, called Panchali, who, blessed with great good fortune, was exceedingly handsome. Her eyes were black, and large as lotus petals, her complexion was dark, and her locks were blue and curly. Her nails were beautifully convex, and bright as burnished copper, her eyebrows were fair, and bosom was deep. Indeed, she resembled the veritable daughter of a celestial born among men. Her body gave out fragrance like that of a blue lotus, perceivable from a distance of full 2 miles. Her beauty was such that she had no equal on earth. Like a celestial herself, she could be desired, in marriage, by a celestial, a Danava, or a Yiksha. When this girl of fair hips was born, an incorporeal voice said, This dark-complexioned girl will be the first of all women, and she will be the cause of the destruction of many Kshatriyas. This slender-waisted one will, in time, accomplish the purpose of the gods, and along with her many a danger will overtake the Kauravas. On hearing these words, the Panchalas uttered a loud leonine roar, and the earth was unable to bear the weight of that joyous concourse. Then beholding the boy and the girl, the daughter-in-law of Prashada, desiring to have them, approached Yaja and said, Let not these know any one else except myself as their mother. Yaja, desiring to do good unto the king, said, So be it. Then the Brahmanas, present there, their expectations fully gratified, bestowed names upon the newborn pair. Let this son of King Drupada, they said, be called Drishtadyumna, because of his excessive audacity and because of his being born like Dyumna with a natural male and weapon. And they also said, because this daughter is so dark in complexion, she should be called Krishna, the dark. The Brahmana continued, Thus were born those twins of the great sacrifice of Drupada. And the great Drona, bringing the Panchala prince into his own abode, taught him all weapons in requital of half the kingdom he had formerly taken from Drupada. The high-souled son of Bharadvaja, regarding destiny to be inevitable, did what would perpetuate his own great deeds. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 170. Vyasa said, Hearing these words of the Brahmana, the sons of Kunti seemed to be, as it were, pierced with darts. Indeed, all those mighty heroes lost their peace of mind. Then the truthful Kunti, beholding all her sons listless and inattentive, addressed Yudhishthira and said, We have now lived many nights in the abode of this Brahmana. We have passed our time pleasantly in this town, living on the alms obtained from many honest and illustrious persons. O oppressor of foes, as we have now seen often and often all the agreeable woods and gardens that are in this part of the country, seeing them again would no longer give any pleasure. O heroic scion of Kuru's race, alms also are not now obtainable here as easily as before. If thou wishest, it would be well for us now to go to Panchala. We have not seen that country. It will, no doubt, O hero, prove delightful to us. O crusher of foes, it hath been heard by us that alms are obtainable in the country of the Panchala, and that Yajnasena, the king thereof, is devoted to Brahmanas. I am of opinion that it is not good to live long in one place. Therefore, O son, if thou likest, it is good for us to go there. Hearing these words, Yudhishthira said, It is our duty to obey thy command, which, besides, must be for our good. I do not, however, know whether my younger brothers are willing to go. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 171. Vyasa continued, Then Kunti spoke unto Bhimasena and Arjuna and the twins regarding the journey to Panchala. They all said, So be it. Then, O king, Kunti with her sons saluted the Brahmana, in whose house they had dwelt, and set out for the delightful town of the illustrious Drupada. Vyasa said, While the illustrious Pandavas were living disguised in the abode of the Brahmana, Vyasa, the son of Satyavati, once went to see them. Those chastisers of foes, beholding him coming, rose up and stepped onward to receive him. Saluting him reverentially and worshipping him also, the Pandavas stood in silence with joined hands. Thus worshipped by them, the sage became gratified. He asked them to be seated, and cheerfully addressing them said, Ye slayers of foes, are ye living in the path of virtue and according to the scriptures? Do ye worship the Brahmanas? Ye are not, I hope, backward in paying homage unto those that deserve your homage? The illustrious Rishi, after this, spoke many words of virtuous import, and after discoursing upon many topics of great interest, he said, An illustrious Rishi, living in a certain hermitage, had a daughter of tender waist, fair lips, and fine eyebrows, and possessing every accomplishment. As a consequence of her own acts, in a past life, the fair maid became very unfortunate. Though chaste and beautiful, the damsel obtained not a husband. With a sorrowful heart she thereupon began to practice ascetic penances with the object of obtaining a husband. She soon gratified by her severe asceticism the god Sankara, Mahadeva, who became propitious unto her, and said unto that illustrious damsel, Ask thou the boon thou desirest. Blessed be thou. I am Sankara, prepared to give thee what thou wilt ask. Desirous of benefiting herself, the maid repeatedly said unto the Supreme Lord, O give me a husband endued with every accomplishment. Then Isana, Mahadeva, that foremost of all speakers, replied unto her, saying, O blessed one, thou shalt have 5 husbands from among the Bharata princes. Thus told, the maiden said unto the god who had given her that boon, O Lord, I desire to have only one husband through thy grace. The god then addressed her again and said these excellent words, Thou hast, O girl, said full 5 times, Give me a husband. Thou shalt, therefore, in another life have 5 husbands. Ye princes of Bharata's line, that damsel of celestial beauty hath been born in the line of Drupada. The faultless Krishna of Prashada's line hath been appointed to be the wife of you all. Ye mighty ones, go therefore to the capital of the Panchalas and dwell ye there. There is no doubt that having obtained her as wife ye shall be very happy. Vyasa continued, having said so unto the Pandavas, the illustrious and blessed grandsire then bade them farewell. The great ascetic then left them and went to the place whence he had come. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 172. Vyasa said, After Vyasa had gone away, those bulls among men, the Pandavas, saluted the Brahmana and bade him farewell, and proceeded towards Panchala, with joyous hearts and with their mother walking before them. Those slayers of all foes, in order to reach their destination, proceeded in a due northerly direction, walking day and night till they reached a sacred shrine of Shiva with the crescent mark on his brow. Then those tigers among men, the sons of Pandu, arrived at the banks of the Ganga. Dhananjaya, that mighty car warrior, walking before them, torch in hand, for showing the way and guarding them against wild animals. And it so happened that at that time the proud king of the Gandharvas, with his wives, was sporting in that solitary region in the delightful waters of the Ganga. The king of the Gandharvas heard the tread of the Pandavas as they approached the river. On hearing the sounds of their footsteps, the mighty Gandharvas were inflamed with wrath, and beholding those chastisers of foes, the Pandavas, approach towards him with their mother, he drew his frightful bow to a circle and said, "It is known that excepting the first 40 seconds the grey twilight preceding nightfall hath been appointed for the wandering of the Ikshas, the Gandharvas, and the Rakshasas, all of whom are capable of going everywhere at will. The rest of the time hath been appointed for man to do his work. If therefore men, wandering during those moments from greed of gain, come near us, both we and the Rakshasas slay those fools. Therefore, persons acquainted with the Vedas never applaud those men, not even kings at the head of their troops, who approach any pools of water at such a time. Stay ye at a distance, and approach me not. Know ye not that I am bathing in the waters of the Bhagirathi? Know that I am Angaraparna the Gandharv, ever relying on my own strength. I am proud and haughty, and am the friend of Kuvera. This my forest on the banks of the Ganga, where I sport to gratify all my senses, is called Angaraparna after my own name. Here neither gods, nor Kapalikas, nor Gandharvas, nor Yakshas can come. How dare ye approach me, who am the brightest jewel on the diadem of Kuvera?" Hearing these words of the Gandharv, Arjuna said, "Blockhead, whether it be day, night, or twilight, who can bar others from the ocean, the sides of the Himalayas, and this river? O Ranger of the skies, whether the stomach be empty or full, whether it is night or day, there is no special time for anybody to come to the Ganga, that foremost of all rivers. As regards ourselves endued with might, we care not when we disturb thee. Wicked being, those who are weak in fighting worship thee. This Ganga, issuing out of the golden peaks of Himavat, falleth into the waters of the ocean, being distributed into 7 streams. They who drink the waters of these 7 streams, viz., Ganga, Yamuna, Sarasvati, Vitashta, Sarayu, Gomathi, and Gandaki, are cleansed of all their sins. O Gandharv, this sacred Ganga again, flowing through the celestial region, is called there the Alkananda. It hath again in the region of the Pitris become the Vedarani, difficult of being crossed by sinners, and Krishnadvapayana himself hath said so. The auspicious and celestial river, capable of leading to heaven them that touch its waters, is free from all dangers. Why dost thou then desire to bar us from it? This act of thine is not in consonance with eternal virtue. Disregarding thy words, why shall we not touch the sacred waters of the Bhagirathi, free from all dangers, and from which none can bar us?" Vyasa continued, hearing these words of Arjuna, Angaraparna became inflamed with wrath, and drawing his bow to a circle began to shoot his arrows like venomous snakes at the Pandavas. Then Dhananjaya, the son of Pandu, wielding a good shield and the torch he held in his hand, warded off all those arrows, and addressing the Gandharv again said, "O Gandharv, seek not to terrify those that are skilled in weapons, for weapons hurled at them vanish like froth. I think, O Gandharv, that ye are superior, in prowess, to men, therefore shall I fight with thee, using celestial weapons, and not with any crooked means. This fiery weapon, that I shall hurl at thee, Vrihaspati, the revered preceptor of Indra, gave unto Bharadvaja, from whom it was obtained by Agnavesya, and from Agnavesya by my preceptor, that foremost of Brahmanas, Drona, who gave it away to me." Vyasa continued, saying these words, the Pandava wrathfully hurled at the Gandharv that blazing weapon made of fire, which burnt the Gandharv's chariot in a trice. Deprived of consciousness by the force of that weapon, the mighty Gandharv was falling, head downward, from his chariot. Dhananjaya seized him by the hair of his head adorned with garlands of flowers, and thus dragged the unconscious Gandharv towards his brothers. Beholding this, that Gandharv's wife Kumbhanasi, desirous of saving her husband, ran towards Yudhishthira and sought his protection. The Gandharvi said, "O exalted one, extend to me thy protection. Oh, set my husband free. O Lord, I am Kumbhanasi by name, the wife of this Gandharv, who seeketh thy protection." Beholding her, so afflicted, the mighty Yudhishthira addressed Arjuna and said, "O slayer of foes, O child, who would slay a foe who hath been vanquished in fight, who hath been deprived of fame, who is protected by a woman, and who hath no prowess?" Arjuna replied, saying, "Keep thou thy life, O Gandharv. Go hence, and grieve not. I Yudhishthira, the king of the Kurus, commandeth me to show thee mercy." The Gandharva replied, I have been vanquished by thee. I shall, therefore, abandon my former name Angaraparna, the blazing vehicle. In name alone, O friend, I should not be boastful when my pride and my strength hath been overcome. I have been fortunate in that I have obtained thee, O Arjuna, that wielder of celestial weapons. I like to impart to thee the power of producing illusions which Gandharvas alone have. My excellent and variegated chariot hath been burnt by means of thy fiery weapon. I who had formerly been called after my excellent chariot should now be called after my burnt chariot. The science of producing illusions that I have spoken of was formerly obtained by me by ascetic penances. That science I will today impart to the giver of my life, thy illustrious self. What good luck doth he not deserve who, after overcoming a foe by his might, giveth him life when that foe asketh for it? This science is called Chakshushi. It was communicated by Manu unto Soma, and by Soma unto Viswavesu, and lastly by Viswavesu unto me. Communicated by my preceptor, that science, having come unto me who am without energy, is gradually becoming fruitless. I have spoken to thee about its origin and transmission. Listen now to its power. One may see, by its aid, whatever one wisheth to see, and in whatever way he liketh, generally or particularly. One can acquire this science only after standing on one leg for 6 months. I shall, however, communicate to thee this science without thyself being obliged to observe any rigid vow. O king, it is for this knowledge that we are superior to men. And as we are capable of seeing everything by spiritual sight, we are equal to the gods. O best of men, I intend to give thee and each of thy brothers 100 steeds born in the country of the Gandharvas. Of celestial color and endued with the speed of the mind, those horses are employed in bearing the celestial and the Gandharvas. They may be lean-fleshed, but they tire not, nor doth their speed suffer on that account. In days of yore the thunderbolt was created for the chief of the celestials in order that he might slay the Asura, Vritra, with it. But hurled at Vritra's head it broke in 1,000 pieces. The celestials worship with reverence those fragments of the thunderbolt. That which is known in the 3 worlds as glory is but a portion of the thunderbolt. The hand of the Brahmana with which he poureth libations on the sacrificial fire, the chariot upon which the Kshatriya fighteth, the charity of the Vaishya, and the service of the Sudra rendered unto the 3 other classes, are all fragments of the thunderbolt. It hath been said that horses, forming as they do a portion of the Kshatriya's chariot, are, on that account, unslayable. Again, horses which form a portion of the Kshatriya's chariot are the offspring of Vadava. Those amongst them that are born in the region of the Gandharvas can go everywhere and assume any hue and speed at the will of their owners. These horses of mine that I give thee will always gratify thy wishes. On hearing these words of the Gandharva, Arjuna said, O Gandharva, if from satisfaction for having obtained thy life at my hands in a situation of danger, thou givest me thy science, and these horses, I would not accept thy gift. The Gandharva replied, saying, A meeting with an illustrious person is ever a source of gratification, besides thou hast given me my life. Gratified with thee, I will give thee my science. That the obligation, however, may not all be on one side, I will take from thee, O Vibhatsu, O bull in Bharata's race, thy excellent and eternal weapon of fire. Arjuna said, I would accept thy horses in exchange for my weapon. Let our friendship last forever. O friend, tell us for what we human beings have to stand in fear of the Gandharvas. Chastisers of foes that we are and virtuous and conversant with the Vedas, tell us, O Gandharva, why in traveling in the night time we have been censured by thee. The Gandharva said, Ye are without wives, though ye have completed the period of study. Ye are without a particular ashrama, mode of life. Lastly, ye are out without a Brahmana walking before, therefore, ye sons of Pandu, ye have been censured by me. The Yakshas, Rakshasas, Gandharvas, Pisachas, Uragas, and Danavas are possessed of wisdom and intelligence, and acquainted with the history of the Kuru race. O hero, I have heard too from Narada and other celestial rishis about the good deeds of your wise ancestors. I myself, too, while roaming over the whole earth bounded by her belt of seas, have witnessed the prowess of thy great race. O Arjuna, I have personal knowledge of thy preceptor, the illustrious son of Bharadvaja, celebrated throughout the three worlds for his knowledge of the Vedas and the science of arms. O tiger in Kuru's race, O son of Pritha, I also know Dharma, Vayu, Sakra, the twin Ashwins, and Pandu, these 6 perpetuators of Kuru race, these excellent celestials and human progenitors of you all. I also know that you 5 brothers are learned and high-souled, that ye are foremost of all wielders of weapons, that ye are brave and virtuous and observant of vows. Knowing that your understanding and hearts are excellent and your behavior faultless, I have yet censured you. For, O thou of Kuru's race, it behoveth no man endued with might of arms to bear with patience any ill usage in the sight of his wife. Especially as, O son of Kunti, our might increaseth during the hours of darkness, accompanied by my wife I was filled with wrath. O best of vow-observing men, I have, however, been vanquished by thee in battle. Listen to me as I tell thee the reasons that have led to my discomfiture. The Brahmacharya is a very superior mode of life, and as thou art in that mode now, it is for this, O Partha, that I have been defeated by thee in battle. O chastiser of foes, if any married Kshatriya fight with us at night, he can never escape with life. But, O Partha, a married Kshatriya, who is sanctified with Brahma, and who hath assigned the cares of his state to a priest, might vanquish all wanderers in the night. O child of Tupti, men should therefore ever employ learned priests possessing self-command for the acquisition of every good luck they desire. That Brahmana is worthy of being the king's priest who is learned in the Vedas and the 6 branches thereof, who is pure and truthful, who is of virtuous soul and possessed of self-command. The monarch becometh ever victorious and finally earneth heaven who hath for his priest a Brahmana conversant with the rules of morality, who is a master of words, and is pure and of good behavior. The king should always select an accomplished priest in order to acquire what he hath not and protect what he hath. He who desireth his own prosperity should ever be guided by his priest, for he may then obtain ever the whole earth surrounded by her belt of seas. O son of Tupti, a king, who is without a Brahmana, can never acquire any land by his bravery or glory of birth alone. Know, therefore, O perpetuator of Kuru's race, that the kingdom lasteth forever in which Brahmanas have power. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 173. Arjuna said, Thou hast addressed me, more than once, as Tapesha. I therefore wish to know what the precise significance of this word is, O virtuous Gandharv, being sons of Kunti, we are, indeed, Kaunteyas. But who is Tupti that we should be called Tapeshas? Vyasa continued, thus addressed, the Gandharv related to the Nanjaya, the son of Kunti, the following story well known in the 3 worlds. The Gandharv said, O son of Pritha, O foremost of all intelligent men, I will duly recite to you in full this charming narrative. Oh, listen with attention to what I say in explanation of why I have addressed thee as Tapesha. That one in heaven who pervadeth by his light the whole firmament had a daughter named Tupti equal unto himself. Tupti, the daughter of the god Vivasvat, was the younger sister of Savitri, and she was celebrated throughout the 3 worlds and devoted to ascetic penances. There was no woman amongst the celestials, the Asuras, the Yakshas, the Rakshasas, the Apsaras, and the Gandharvas, who was equal to her in beauty. Of perfect, symmetrical and faultless features, of black and large eyes, and in beautiful attire, the girl was chaste and of perfect conduct. And, O Bharata, seeing her Savitri, the sun, thought that there was none in the 3 worlds who, for his beauty, accomplishments, behavior, and learning, deserved to be her husband. Beholding her attain the age of puberty and, therefore, worthy of being bestowed on a husband, her father knew no peace of mind, always thinking of the person he should select. At that time, O son of Kunti, Riksha's son, that bull amongst the Kurus, the mighty king Samvarana, was duly worshipping Surya with offerings of arugya and flower garlands and scents, and with vows and fasts and ascetic penances of various kinds. Indeed, Samvarana was worshipping Surya constantly in all his glory, with devotion and humility and piety. And beholding Samvarana conversant with all rules of virtue and unequaled on earth for beauty, Surya regarded him as the fit husband for his daughter, Tupti. And, O thou of Kuru's race, Vivasva then resolved to bestow his daughter on that best of kings, viz., Samvarana, the scion of a race of worldwide fame. As Surya himself in the heavens filleth the firmament with his splendor, so did King Samvarana on earth fill every region with the splendor of his good achievements. And all men, O Partha, except Brahmanas, worshipped Samvarana. Blessed with good luck, King Samvarana excelled Soma in soothing the hearts of friends and Surya in scorching the hearts of foes. And, O Kaurava, Tapana, Surya, himself was resolved upon bestowing his daughter Tapti upon King Samvarana, who was possessed of such virtues and accomplishments. Once on a time, O Partha, King Samvarana, endued with beauty of person and immeasurable prowess, went on a hunting expedition to the underwoods on the mountain breast. While wandering in quest of deer, the excellent steed the king rode, overcome, O Partha, with hunger, thirst, and fatigue, died on the mountains. Abandoning the steed, the king, O Arjuna, began to wander about upon the mountain breast on foot, and in course of his wandering the monarch saw a maiden of large eyes and unrivaled beauty, that grinder of hostile host, that tiger among kings himself without a companion. Beholding there that maiden without a companion, stood motionless gazing at her steadfastly. For her beauty, the monarch for some moment believed her to be the goddess, Sri herself. Next he regarded her to be the embodiment of the rays emanating from Surya. In splendor of her person she resembled a flame of fire, though in benignity and loveliness she resembled a spotless digit of the moon. And standing on the mountain breast, the black-eyed maiden appeared like a bright statue of gold. The mountain itself, with its creepers and plants, because of the beauty and attire of that damsel, seemed to be converted into gold. The sight of that maiden inspired the monarch with a contempt for all women that he had seen before. By beholding her, the king regarded his eyesight truly blessed. Nothing the king had seen from the day of his birth could equal, he thought, the beauty of that girl. The king's heart and eyes were captivated by that damsel, as if they were bound with a cord, and he remained rooted to that spot, deprived of his senses. The monarch thought that the artificer of so much beauty had created it only after churning the whole world of gods, asuras, and human beings. Entertaining these various thoughts, King Samvarana regarded that maiden as unrivaled in the three worlds for wealth of beauty. And the monarch of pure descent, beholding the beautiful maiden, was pierced with kamas, cupids, shafts, and lost his peace of mind. Burnt with the strong flame of desire, the king asked that charming maiden, still innocent, though in her full youth, saying, "Who art thou and whose? Why also dost thou stay here? O thou of sweet smiles, why dost thou wander alone in these solitary woods? Of every feature perfectly faultless, and decked with every ornament, thou seemest to be the coveted ornament of these ornaments themselves. Thou seemest not to be of celestial, or asura, or yaksha, or rakshasa, or naga, or gandharv, or human origin. O excellent lady, the best of women that I have ever seen or heard of would not compare with thee in beauty. O thou of handsome face, at sight of thee lovelier than the moon, and graced with eyes like lotus petals, the god of desire is grinding me." King Samvarana thus addressed that damsel in the forest, who, however, spoke not a word unto the monarch burning with desire. Instead, like lightning in the clouds, that large-eyed maiden quickly disappeared in the very sight of the monarch. The king then wandered through the whole forest, like one out of his senses, in search of that girl of eyes like lotus petals. Failing to find her, that best of monarchs indulged in copious lamentations, and for a time stood motionless with grief. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 174. The Gandharv continued, "When that maiden disappeared, that feller of hostile ranks, deprived of his senses by kama, concupiscence, himself fell down on the earth. And as the monarch fell down, that maiden of sweet smiles and prominent and round hips appeared again before him, and smiling sweetly, said unto that perpetuator of Kuru's race these honeyed words, 'Rise, rise, O chastiser of foes. Blessed be thou, it behoveth thee not, O tiger among kings, to lose thy reason, a celebrated man as thou art in the world.'" Addressed in these honeyed words, the king opened his eyes and saw before him that selfsame girl of swelling hips. The monarch, who was burning with the flame of desire, then addressed that black-eyed damsel in accents, weak with emotion, and said, "Blessed be thou, O excellent woman of black eyes. as I am burning with desire and paying thee court, oh, accept me. My life is ebbing away. O thou of large eyes, for thy sake it is, O thou of the splendor of the filaments of the lotus, that Kama is incessantly piercing me with his keen shafts without stopping for a moment. O amiable and cheerful girl, I have been bitten by Kama, who is even like a venomous viper. O thou of swelling and large hips, have mercy on me. O thou of handsome and faultless features, O thou of face like unto the lotus petal or the moon, O thou of voice sweet as that of singing kinnaras, my life now depends on thee. Without thee, O timid one, I am unable to live. O thou of eyes like lotus petals, Kama is piercing me incessantly. O large-eyed girl, be merciful unto me. It becometh thee not, O black-eyed maid, to cast me off, O handsome girl, it behoveth thee to relieve me from such affliction by giving me thy love. At first sight thou hast attracted my heart. My mind wandereth. Beholding thee I like not to cast my eyes on any other woman. Be merciful. I am thy obedient slave, thy adorer. Oh, accept me. O beautiful lady, O large-eyed girl, at the sight of thee, the god of desire hath entered my heart, and is piercing me with his shafts. O thou of lotus eyes, the flame of desire burneth within me. Oh, extinguish that flame with the water of thy love poured on it. O beautiful lady, by becoming mine, pacify thou the irrepressible god of desire that hath appeared here armed with his deadly bow and arrows, and that is piercing me incessantly with those keen shafts of his. O thou of the fairest complexion, wed me according to the Gandharv form, for, O thou of tapering hips, of all forms of marriage the Gandharv hath been said to be the best. The Gandharv continued, hearing those words of the monarch, Tupti made answer, O king, I am not the mistress of my own self. Be it known that I am a maiden under the control of my father. If thou really entertainest an affection for me, demand me of my father. Thou sayest, O king, that thy heart hath been robbed by me. But thou also hast, at first sight, robbed me of my heart. I am not the mistress of my body, and therefore, O best of kings, I do not approach thee. Women are never independent. What girl is there in the three worlds that would not desire thee for her husband, as thou art kind unto all thy dependents, and as thou art born in a pure race? Therefore, when the opportunity comes, ask my father Aditya for my hand with worship, ascetic penances, and vows. If my father bestoweth me upon thee, then, O king, I shall ever be thy obedient wife. My name is Tupti, and I am the younger sister of Savitri, and the daughter, O bull amongst Kshatriyas of Savitri, of Sun, the illuminator of the universe. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 175. The Gandharv continued, saying this, Tupti of faultless features, ascended the skies. The monarch thereupon again fell down on the earth. His ministers and followers searching for him throughout the forest at length came upon him lying on that solitary spot, and beholding that excellent king, that mighty bowman, thus lying forsaken on the ground like a rainbow dropped from the firmament, his minister-in-chief became like one burnt by a flame of fire. Advancing hastily with affection and respect, the minister raised that best of monarchs lying prostrate on the ground and deprived of his senses by desire. Old in wisdom as in age, old in achievements as in policy, the minister, after having raised the prostrate monarch, became easy in mind. Addressing the king in sweet words that were also for his good, he said, Blessed be thou, O sinless one. Fear not, O tiger among kings. The minister thought that the monarch, that great feller of hostile ranks in battle, had been lying on the ground overcome with hunger, thirst, and fatigue. The old man then sprinkled over the crownless head of the monarch water that was cold and rendered fragrant with lotus petals. Slowly regaining his consciousness, the mighty monarch sent away all his attendants with the exception of his minister only. After those attendants had retired at his command, the king sat upon the mountain breast. Having purified himself duly, the king sat upon that chief of mountains, and began, with joined palms and upturned face, to worship Surya. King Samvarana, that smiter of all foes, thought also of his chief priest Vasishtha, that best of rishis. The king continued to sit there day and night without intermission. The Brahmana sage Vasishtha came there on the 12th day, that great rishi of soul under perfect command knew at once by his ascetic power that the monarch had lost his senses in consequence of Tupti. And that virtuous and best of Munis, as soon as he knew this, desirous of benefiting the monarch who was ever observant of vows, addressed him and gave him every assurance. The illustrious Rishi, in the very sight of that monarch, ascended upward to interview Surya, himself possessed of the splendor of that luminary. The Brahmana then approached with joined hands the god of 1,000 rays and introduced himself cheerfully unto him, saying, I am Vasishtha. Then Vivasvat of great energy said unto that best of rishis, Welcome art thou, O great rishi. Tell me what is in thy mind. O thou of great good fortune, whatever thou demandest of me, O foremost of eloquent men, I will confer on thee, however difficult it may be for me. Thus addressed by Surya, the rishi of great ascetic merit, bowing unto the god of light, replied, saying, O Vibhavasu, this thy daughter, Tupti, the younger sister of Savitri, I ask of thee for Samvarana. That monarch is of mighty achievements, conversant with virtue, and of high soul. O firmament ranger, Samvarana will make a worthy husband for thy daughter. Thus addressed by the Rishi Vibhakara, resolved upon bestowing his daughter upon Samvarana, saluted the Rishi, and replied unto him, saying, O, Samvarana is the best of monarchs, thou art the best of rishis, Tupti is the best of women. What should we do, therefore, but bestow her on Samvarana? With these words, the god Tapana made over his daughter, Tupti, of every feature perfectly faultless, unto the illustrious Vasishtha to bestow her upon Samvarana. And the great Rishi then accepted the girl, Tupti, and taking leave of Surya, came back to the spot where that bull amongst the Kurus, of celestial achievements, was. King Samvarana, possessed by love and with his heart fixed on Tupti, beholding that celestial maiden of sweet smiles led by Vasishtha, became exceedingly glad. And Tupti of fair eyebrows came down from the firmament like lightning from the clouds, dazzling the 10 points of the heavens. And the illustrious Rishi Vasishtha of pure soul approached the monarch after the latter's 12 nights' vow was over. It was thus that King Samvarana obtained a wife after having worshipped with like the full moon. And that mighty bowman, that foremost one in Kuru's race, having his curiosity greatly excited by what he heard of Vasishtha's ascetic power, asked the Gandharv, saying, I desire to hear of the Rishi whom thou hast mentioned as Vasishtha. Oh, tell me in full about him. O chief of the Gandharvs, tell me who this illustrious Rishi was that was the priest of our forefathers. The Gandharv replied, Vasishtha is Brahma's spiritual, lit, mind-born, son and Arundhati's husband. Ever difficult of being conquered by the very immortals, desire and wrath, conquered by Vasishtha's ascetic penances, used to shampoo his feet. Though his wrath was excited by Viswamitra's offense, that high-souled Rishi did not yet exterminate Kusikas, the tribe whose king Viswamitra was. Afflicted at the loss of his sons, he did not, as though powerless, though really otherwise, do any dreadful act destructive of Viswamitra, like the ocean transgressing not its continents, Vasishtha transgressed not the laws of Yama by bringing back his children from the domains of the king of the dead. It was by obtaining that illustrious one who had conquered his own self that Ikshvaku and other great monarchs acquired the whole earth. And, O prince of Kuru's race, it was by obtaining Vasishtha, that best of rishis, as their priest, that those monarchs performed many grand sacrifices. And, O best of the Pandavas, that regenerate Rishi assisted these monarchs in the performance of their sacrifices like Vrihaspati assisting the immortals. Therefore, look ye for some accomplished and desirable Brahmana conversant with the Vedas and in whose heart virtue prevails, to appoint as your priest. A Kshatriya of good lineage, desirous of extending his dominions by conquering the earth, should, O Partha, first appoint a priest. He who is desirous of conquering the earth should have a Brahmana before him. Therefore, O Arjuna, let some accomplished and learned Brahmana, who has his senses under complete control and who is conversant with religion, profit, and pleasure, be your priest. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 176. Vaisampayana continued, hearing this, Arjuna said, O Gandharv, whence arose the hostility between Viswamitra and Vasishtha, both of whom dwelt in a celestial hermitage? Oh, tell us all about it. The Gandharv replied, O Partha, the story of Vasishtha is regarded as a Purana legend in all the 3 worlds. Listen to me as I recite it fully. There was, in Kanyakuvja, O bull of Bharata's race, a great king of worldwide fame named Gadi, the son of Kusika. The virtuous Gadi had a son named Viswamitra, that grinder of foes, possessing a large army and many animals and vehicles. And Viswamitra, accompanied by his ministers, used to roam in quest of deer through the deep woods and over picturesque Maracetic penances the propitious Lord Vivasvat, by the help of Vasishtha's ascetic power. And Samvarana, that bull among men with due rights, took Tupti's hand on that mountain breast which was resorted to by the Celestials and the Gandharvas. The royal sage, with the permission of Vasishtha, desired to sport with his wife on that mountain. And the king caused Vasishtha to be proclaimed his regent in his capital and kingdom, in the woods and gardens. And bidding farewell unto the monarch, Vasishtha left him and went away. Samvarana, who sported on that mountain like a celestial, sported with his wife in the woods and the underwoods on that mountain for 12 full years. And, O best of the Bharatas, the god of 1,000 eyes poured no rain for 12 years on the capital and on the kingdom of that monarch. Then, O chastiser of enemies, when that season of drought broke out, the people of that kingdom, as also the trees and lower animals, began to die fast. And during the continuance of that dreadful drought, not even a drop of dew fell from the skies, and no corn grew. And the inhabitants in despair, and afflicted with the fear of hunger, left their homes and fled away in all directions. And the famished people of the capital and the country began to abandon their wives and children and grew reckless of one another. The people being afflicted with hunger, without a morsel of food and reduced to skeletons, the capital looked very much like the city of the king of the dead, full of only ghostly beings. On beholding the capital reduced to such a state, the illustrious and virtuous and best of rishis, Vasishtha, was resolved upon applying a remedy and brought back unto the city that tiger among kings, Samvarana, along with his wife, after the latter had passed so long a period in solitude and seclusion. After the king had entered his capital, things became as before, for, when that tiger among kings came back to his own, the god of 1,000 eyes, the slayer of Asuras, poured rain in abundance and caused corn to grow. Revivified by the foremost of virtuous souls, the capital and the country became animated with extreme joy. The monarch, with his wife, Tupti, once more performed sacrifices for 12 years, like the Lord Indra, god of rain, performing sacrifices with his wife, Sachi. The Gandharv continued, This, O Partha, is the history of Tupti of old, the daughter of Vivasvat. It is for her that thou art called Tapasya. King Samvarana begot upon Tupti a son named Kuru, who was the foremost of ascetics. Born in the race of Kuru, thou art, O Arjuna, to be called Tapasya. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 177. Vyasa said, That bull among the Bharatas, Arjuna, hearing these words of the Gandharv, was inspired with feelings of devotion and stood sheaves. JBH, killing deer and wild boars. Once on a time, while out in quest of deer, the king became weak with exertion and thirst. The monarch arrived in that state at the asylum of Vasishtha, and the blessed and illustrious Rishi, beholding him arrive, reverenced with his homage that best of men, King Viswamitra. And O Bharata, the Rishi saluted the monarch by offering him water to wash his face and feet with, and arugya, and wild fruits, and clarified butter. For the illustrious Rishi had a cow yielding anything that was desired of her. When she was addressed, saying, O give Kama, she always yielded the article that was sought. And she yielded various fruits and corn, wild or grown in gardens and fields, and milk, and many excellent nutritive viands full of 6 different kinds of juice, taste, and like unto nectar itself, and various other kinds of enjoyable things, O Arjuna, of ambrosial taste for drinking and eating, and for licking and sucking, and also many precious gems and robes of various kinds. With these desirable objects in profusion the monarch was worshipped. And the king with his minister and troops became highly pleased. And the monarch wondered much, beholding that cow with 6 elevated limbs, and the beautiful flanks and hips, and 5 limbs that were broad, and eyes prominent like those of the frog, and beautiful in size, and high udders, and faultless make, and straight and uplifted ears, and handsome horns, and well-developed head and neck. And, O Prince, the son of Gadi, gratified with everything and applauding the cow named Nandini, addressed the Rishi, saying, O Brahmana, O great Muni, give me thy Naradini in exchange for 10,000 kine, or my kingdom. Enjoy thou my kingdom, giving me thy cow. Hearing these words of Viswamitra, Vasishtha said, O sinless one, this cow hath been kept by me for the sake of the gods, guests, and the Pitris, as also for my sacrifices. I cannot give Nandini in exchange for even thy kingdom. Viswamitra replied, I am a Kshatriya, but thou art a Brahmana devoted to asceticism and study. Is there any energy in Brahmanas who are peaceful and who have their souls under perfect command? When thou givest me not what I desire in exchange even for 10,000 cows, I will not abandon the practice of my order. I will take thy cow even by force. Vasishtha said, Thou art a Kshatriya endued with might of arms. Thou art a powerful monarch. Oh, do in haste what thou desirest, and stop not to consider its propriety. The Gandharv continued, thus addressed by Vasishtha, Viswamitra, O Partha, then forcibly seized Nandini, that cow, white, like the swan or the moon, and attempted to take her away, afflicting her with stripes and persecuting her otherwise. The innocent Nandini then began, O Partha, to low piteously, and approaching the illustrious Vasishtha stood before him with uplifted face. Though persecuted very cruelly, she refused to leave the Rishi's asylum. Beholding her in that plight, Vasishtha said, O amiable one, thou art lowing repeatedly, and I am hearing thy cries. But, O Nandini, even Viswamitra is taking thee away by force. What can I do in this matter, as I am a forgiving Brahmana? The Gandharv continued, Then, O bull in Bharata's race, Nandini, alarmed at the sight of Viswamitra's troops and terrified by Viswamitra himself, approached the Rishi still closer, and said, O illustrious one, why art thou so indifferent to my poor self, afflicted with the stripes of the cruel troops of Viswamitra, and crying so piteously as if I were masterless? Hearing these words of the crying and persecuted Nandini, the great Rishi lost not his patience nor turned from his vow of forgiveness. He replied, The Kshatriyas' might lies in physical strength, the Brahmanas in forgiveness. Because I cannot give up forgiveness, go thou, O Nandini, if thou choosest. Nandini answered, Castest thou me away, O illustrious one, that thou sayest so? If thou dost not cast me off, I cannot, O Brahmana, be taken away by force. Vasishtha said, O blessed one, I do not cast thee off. Stay if thou canst. Oh, yonder is thy calf, tied with a stout cord, and even now being weakened by it. The Gandharv continued, Then the cow of Vasishtha, hearing the word stay, raised her head and neck upward, and became terrible to behold. With eyes red with rage and lowing repeatedly, she then attacked Viswamitra's troops on all sides. Afflicted with their stripes and running hither and thither with those red eyes of hers, her wrath increased. Blazing with rage, she soon became terrible to behold like unto the sun in his midday glory. And from her tail she began to rain showers of burning coals all around. And some moments after, from her tail she brought forth an army of Pandavas, and from her udders, an army of Dravidas and Sakas, and from her womb, an army of Yavnas, and from her dung, an army of Savaras, and from her urine, an army of Kanchis, and from her sides, an army of Savaras. And from the froth of her mouth came out hosts of Pandras and Karatas, Yavnas and Sinhalas, and the barbarous tribes of Kasas and Chavukas and Palindas and Chinas and Hunas with Keralas, and numerous other Mlechchas. And that vast army of Mlechchas in various uniforms, and armed with various weapons, as soon as it sprang into life, deploying in the very sight of Viswamitra, attacked that monarch's soldiers. And so numerous was that Mlechcha host that each particular soldier of Viswamitra was attacked by a band of 6 or 7 of their enemies. Assailed with a mighty shower of weapons, Viswamitra's troops broke and fled, panic-stricken, in all directions, before his very eyes. But, O bull in Bharata's race, the troops of Vasishtha, though excited with wrath, took not the life of any of Viswamitra's troops. Nandini simply caused the monarch's army to be routed and driven off. And driven, from the asylum, 27 full miles, panic-stricken, they shrieked aloud and beheld not anyone that could protect them. Vishwamitra, beholding this wonderful feat that resulted from Brahmana prowess, became disgusted with Kshatriya prowess and said, "Oh, fie on Kshatriya prowess! Brahmana prowess is true prowess. In judging of strength and weakness, I see that asceticism is true strength." Saying this, the monarch, abandoning his large domains and regal splendor and turning his back upon all pleasures, set his mind on asceticism. Crowned with success in asceticism and filling the three worlds with the heat of his ascetic penances, he afflicted all creatures and finally became a Brahmana. The son of Kusika at last drank Soma with Indra himself in heaven. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 178. The Gandharv continued, "There was, O Partha, a king in this world, named Kalmashapada, who was of the race of Ikshvaku and was unequaled on earth for prowess. One day the king went from his capital into the woods for purposes of hunting, and this grinder of foes pierced, with his arrows, many deer and wild boars. And in those deep woods the king also slew many rhinoceroses. Engaged in sport for some length of time, the monarch became very much fatigued, and at last he gave up the chase, desiring to rest a while. The great Vishwamitra, endued with energy, had, a little while ago, desired to make that monarch his disciple. As the monarch, afflicted with hunger and thirst, was proceeding through the woods, he came across that best of rishis, the illustrious son of Vasishtha, coming along the same path. The king, ever victorious in battle, saw that Muni bearing the name of Saktri, that illustrious propagator of Vasishtha's race, the eldest of the high-souled Vasishtha's 100 sons, coming along from opposite direction. The king, beholding him, said, "Stand out of our way." The rishi, addressing the monarch in a conciliatory manner, said unto him sweetly, "O king, this is my way. This is the eternal rule of morality indicated in every treatise on duty and religion, viz., that a king should ever make way for Brahmanas." Thus did they address each other respecting their right of way. stand aside, were the words they said unto each other. The rishi, who was in the right, did not yield, nor did the king yield to him from pride and anger. That best of monarchs, enraged at the rishi, refusing to yield him the way, acted like a Rakshasa, striking him with his whip. Thus whipped by the monarch, that best of rishis, the son of Vasishtha, was deprived of his senses by anger, and speedily cursed that first of monarchs, saying, "O worst of kings, since thou persecutest like a Rakshasa an ascetic, thou shalt from this day become a Rakshasa subsisting on human flesh. Hence, thou worst of kings, thou shalt wander over the earth, affecting human form." Thus did the Rishi Sakti, endued with great prowess, speak unto King Kalmashapada. At this time Vishwamitra, between whom and Vasishtha there was a dispute about the discipleship of Kalmashapada, approached the place where that monarch and Vasishtha's son were. And, O Partha, that rishi of severe ascetic penances, viz., Vishwamitra of great energy, approached the pair, knowing by his spiritual insight that they had been thus quarreling with each other. After the curse had been pronounced, that best of monarchs knew that rishi to be Vasishtha's son and equal unto Vasishtha himself in energy. And, O Bharata, Vishwamitra, desirous of benefiting himself, remained on that spot, concealed from the sight of both by making himself invisible. Then that best of monarchs, thus cursed by Saktri, desiring to propitiate the rishi, began to humbly beseech him. And, O chief of the Kurus, Vishwamitra, ascertaining the disposition of the king, and fearing that the difference might be made up, ordered a Rakshasa to enter the body of the king. And a Rakshasa of the name of Kinkara then entered the monarch's body in obedience to Saktri's curse and Vishwamitra's command. And knowing, O chastiser of foes, that the Rakshasa had possessed himself of the monarch, that best of rishis, Vishwamitra, then left the spot and went away. Shortly after, O Partha, the monarch, possessed by the Rakshasa and terribly afflicted by him, lost all his senses. At this time a Brahmana beheld the king in the woods. Afflicted with hunger, that Brahmana begged of the king some food with meat. The royal sage, Kalmashapada, that cherisher of friends, answered the Brahmana, saying, "Stay thou here, O Brahmana, for a moment. On my return, I will give thee whatever food thou desirest." Having said this, the monarch went away, but the Brahmana stayed on there. The high-minded king, having roved for some time at pleasure and according to his will, at last entered his inner apartment. Thus waking at midnight and remembering his promise, he summoned his cook and told him of his promise unto the Brahmana staying in the forest. And he commanded him, saying, Hie thee to that forest. A Brahmana waiteth for me in the hope of food. Go and entertain him with food and meat. The Gandharv continued, thus commanded, the cook went out in search of meat. Distressed at not having found any, he informed the king of his failure. The monarch, however, possessed as he was by the Rakshasa, repeatedly said, without scruple of any kind, feed him with human flesh. The cook, saying, so be it, went to the place where the king's executioners were, and thence taking human flesh and washing and cooking it duly and covering it with boiled rice, offered it unto that hungry Brahmana devoted to ascetic penances. But that best of Brahmanas, seeing with his spiritual sight that the food was unholy and, therefore, unworthy of being eaten, said these words with eyes red with anger, because that worst of kings offereth me food that is unholy and unworthy of being taken, therefore that wretch shall have himself a fondness for such food. And becoming fond of human flesh as cursed by Saktri of old, the wretch shall wander over the earth, alarming and otherwise troubling all creatures. The curse, therefore, on that king, thus repeated a second time, became very strong, and the king, possessed by a Rakshasa disposition, soon lost all his senses. A little while after, O Bharata, that best of monarchs, deprived of all his senses by the Rakshasa within him, beholding Saktri who had cursed him, said, because thou hast pronounced on me this extraordinary curse, therefore, I shall begin my life of cannibalism by devouring thee. Having said this, the king immediately slew Saktri and ate him up, like a tiger eating the animal it was fond of. Beholding Saktri thus slain and devoured, Viswamitra repeatedly urged that Rakshasa, who was within the monarch, against the other sons of Vasishtha. Like a wrathful lion devouring small animals, that Rakshasa soon devoured the other sons of the illustrious Vasishtha that were junior to Saktri in age. But Vasishtha, learning that all his sons had been caused to be slain by Viswamitra, patiently bore his grief like the great mountain that bears the earth. That best of Munis, that foremost of intelligent men, was resolved rather to sacrifice his own life than exterminate, in anger, the race of Kusikas. The illustrious Rishi threw himself down from the summit of Meru, but he descended on the stony ground as though on a heap of cotton. And, O son of Pandu, when the illustrious one found that death did not result from that fall, he kindled a huge fire in the forest and entered it with alacrity. But that fire, though burning brightly, consumed him not. O slayer of foes, that blazing fire seemed to him cool. Then the great Muni, under the influence of grief, beholding the sea, tied a stony weight to his neck and threw himself into its waters. But the waves soon cast him ashore. At last, when that Brahmana of rigid vows succeeded not in killing himself by any means, he returned, in distress of heart, to his asylum. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 179. The Gandharv continued, beholding his asylum bereft of his children, the Muni afflicted with great grief left it again. And in course of his wandering he saw, O Partha, a river swollen with the waters of the rainy season, sweeping away numberless trees and plants that had grown on its margin. Beholding this, O thou of Kuru's race, the distressed Muni thinking that he would certainly be drowned if he fell into the waters of that river, he tied himself strongly with several cords and flung himself, under the influence of grief, into the current of that mighty stream. But, O slayer of foes, that stream soon cut those cords and cast the Rishi ashore. And the Rishi rose from the bank, freed from the cords with which he had tied himself. And because his cords were thus broken off by the violence of the current, the Rishi called the stream by the name of Vipasa, the cord breaker. For his grief the Muni could not, from that time, stay in one place. He began to wander over mountains and along rivers and lakes. And beholding once again a river named Hamvati, flowing from Himavat, of terrible aspect and full of fierce crocodiles and other aquatic monsters, the Rishi threw himself into it, but the river, mistaking the Brahmana for a mass of unquenchable fire, immediately flew in 100 different directions, and hath been known ever since by the name of the Satadru, the river of 100 courses. Seeing himself on the dry land, even there he exclaimed, "Oh, I cannot die by my own hands." Saying this, the Rishi once more bent his steps towards his asylum. Crossing numberless mountains and countries, as he was about to re-enter his asylum, he was followed by his daughter-in-law named Adrasyanti. As she neared him, he heard the sound from behind of a very intelligent recitation of the Vedas with the 6 graces of elocution. Hearing that sound, the rishi asked, "Who is it that followeth me?" His daughter-in-law then answered, "I am Adrasyanti, the wife of Saktri. I am helpless, though devoted to asceticism." Hearing her, Vasishtha said, "O daughter, whose is this voice that I heard, repeating the Vedas along with the Angas like unto the voice of Saktri reciting the Vedas with the Angas?" Adrasyanti answered, "I bear in my womb a child by thy son Saktri. He hath been here full 12 years. The voice thou hearest is that of the Muni, who is reciting the Vedas." The Gandharv continued, thus addressed by her the illustrious Vasishtha became exceedingly glad. And saying, "Oh, there is a child of my race." He refrained, O Partha, from self-destruction. The sinless one, accompanied by his daughter-in-law, then returned to his asylum. And the rishi saw one day in the solitary woods the Rakshasa, Kalmashapada. The king, O Bharata, possessed by fierce Rakshasa, as he saw the rishi, became filled with wrath and rose up, desiring to devour him. And Adrasyanti, beholding before her that the Rakshasa of cruel deeds, addressed Vasishtha in these words, full of anxiety and fear, "O illustrious one, the cruel Rakshasa, like unto death himself armed with his fierce club, cometh towards us with a wooden club in hand. There is none else on earth, except thee, O illustrious one, and, O foremost of all that are conversant with the Vedas, to restrain him today. Protect me, O illustrious one, from this cruel wretch of terrible mien. Surely, the Rakshasa cometh hither to devour us." Vasishtha, hearing this, said, "Fear not, O daughter, there is no need of any fear from any Rakshasa. This one is no Rakshasa from whom thou apprehendest such imminent danger. This is King Kalmashapada, endued with great energy and celebrated on earth." That, recovering his power of reason, the king saluted that best of rishis with joined palms and said, "O illustrious one, I am the son of Sudasa and thy disciple, O best of Munis. Oh, tell me what is thy pleasure and what I am to do." Vasishtha replied, saying, "My desire hath already been accomplished. Return now to thy kingdom and rule thy subjects. And, O chief of men, never insult Brahmanas any more." The monarch replied, "O illustrious one, I shall never more insult superior Brahmanas. In obedience to thy command, I shall always worship Brahmanas. But, O best of Brahmanas, I desire to obtain from thee that by which, O foremost of all that are conversant with the Vedas, I may be freed from the debt I owe to the race of Ikshvaku. O best of men, it behoveth thee to grant me, for the perpetuation of Ikshvaku's race, a desirable son possessing beauty and accomplishments and good behavior." The Gandharv continued, thus addressed, Vasishtha, that best of Brahmanas devoted to truth, replied unto that mighty bowman of a monarch, saying, "I will give you." After some time, O prince of men, Vasishtha, accompanied by the monarch, went to the latter's capital known all over the earth by the name of Ayodhya. The citizens in great joy came out to receive the sinless and illustrious one, like the dwellers in heaven coming out to receive their chief. The monarch, accompanied by Vasishtha, re-entered his auspicious capital after a long time. The citizens of Ayodhya beheld their king accompanied by his priest, as if he were the rising sun. The monarch, who was superior to everyone in beauty, filled by his splendor the whole town of Ayodhya, like the autumnal moon filling by his splendor the whole firmament. And the excellent city itself, in consequence of its streets having been watered and swept, and of the rows of banners and pendants beautifying it all around, gladdened the monarch's heart. And, O prince of Kuru's race, the city filled as it was with joyous and healthy souls, in consequence of his presence, looked gay like Amravati with the presence of the chief of the celestials. After the royal sage had entered his capital, the queen, at the king's command, approached Vasishtha. The great rishi, making a covenant with her, united himself with her according to the high ordinance. And after a little while, when the queen conceived, that best of rishis, receiving the reverential salutations of the king, went back to his asylum. The queen bore the embryo in her womb for a long time. When she saw that she did not bring forth anything, she tore open her womb by a piece of stone. It was then that at the 12th year of the conception was born Asmaka, that bull amongst men, that royal sage who founded the city of Paudanya. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 180. The Gandharv continued, Then, O Partha, Adrasyanti, who had been residing in Vasishtha's asylum, brought forth, when the time came, a son who was the perpetuator of Saktri's race and who was a second Saktri in everything. O foremost of Bharatas, that best of Munis, the illustrious Vasishtha himself performed the usual afterbirth ceremonies of his grandson. And, because the Rishi Vasishtha had resolved on self-destruction but had abstained therefrom as soon as he knew of the existence of that child, when born, was called Parasara, the vivifier of the dead. The virtuous Parasara, from the day of his birth, knew Vasishtha for his father and behaved towards the Muni as such. One day, O son of Kunti, the child addressed Vasishtha, that first of Brahmana sages, as father, in the presence of his mother Adrasyanti. Adrasyanti, hearing the very intelligible sound father sweetly uttered by her son, addressed him with tearful eyes and said, O child, do not address this thy grandfather as father. Thy father, O son, has been devoured by a Rakshasa in a different forest. O innocent one, he is not thy father whom thou regardest so. The revered one is the father of that celebrated father of thine. Thus addressed by his mother, that best of rishis of truthful speech, gave way to sorrow, but soon fired up and resolved to destroy the whole creation. Then that illustrious and great ascetic Vasishtha, that foremost of all persons conversant with Brahma, that son of Mitravaruna, that rishi acquainted with positive truth, addressed his grandson who had set his heart upon the destruction of the world. Hear, O Arjuna, the arguments by which Vasishtha succeeded in driving out that resolution from his grandson's mind. The Gandharv continued, Then Vasishtha said, There was a celebrated king of the name of Kritavirya. That bull among the kings of the earth was the disciple of the Veda-knowing Bhrigus. That king, O child, after performing the Soma sacrifice, gratified the Brahmanas with great presents of rice and wealth. After that monarch had ascended to heaven, an occasion came when his descendants were in want of wealth. And knowing that the Bhrigus were rich, those princes went unto those best of Brahmanas, in the guise of beggars. Some amongst the Bhrigus, to protect their wealth, buried it under earth, and some from fear of the Kshatriyas, began to give away their wealth unto other Brahmanas, while some amongst them duly gave unto the Kshatriyas whatever they wanted. It happened, however, that some Kshatriyas, in digging as they pleased at the house of particular Bhargava, came upon a large treasure. And the treasure was seen by all those bulls among Kshatriyas who had been there. Enraged at what they regarded as the deceitful behavior of the Bhrigus, the Kshatriyas insulted the Brahmanas, though the latter asked for mercy. And those mighty bowmen began to slaughter the Bhrigus with their sharp arrows. And the Kshatriyas wandered over the earth, slaughtering even the embryos that were in the wombs of the women of the Bhrigu race. And while the Bhrigu race was thus being exterminated, the women of that tribe fled from fear to the inaccessible mountains of Himavat. And one amongst these women, of tapering thighs, desiring to perpetuate her husband's race, held in one of her thighs an embryo endued with great energy. A certain Brahmana woman, however, who came to know this fact, went from fear unto the Kshatriyas and reported the matter unto them. And the Kshatriyas then went to destroy that embryo. Arrived at the place, they beheld the would-be mother blazing with inborn energy, and the child that was in her thigh came out tearing up the thigh and dazzling the eyes of those Kshatriyas like the midday sun. Thus deprived of their eyes, the Kshatriyas began to wander over those inaccessible mountains. And distressed at the loss of sight, the princes were afflicted with woe, and desirous of regaining the use of their eyes, they resolved to seek the protection of that faultless woman. Then those Kshatriyas, afflicted with sorrow, and from loss of sight like unto a fire that hath gone out, addressed with anxious hearts that illustrious lady, saying, By thy grace, O lady, we wish to be restored to sight. We shall then return to our homes altogether and abstain forever from our sinful practice. O handsome one, it behoveth thee with thy child to show us mercy. It behoveth thee to favor these kings by granting them their eyesight. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 181. Vasishtha continued, The Brahmana lady, thus addressed by them, said, Ye children, I have not robbed you of your eyesight, nor am I angry with you. This child, however, of the Brigger race hath certainly been angry with you. There is little doubt, ye children, that ye have been robbed of your sight by that illustrious child whose wrath hath been kindled at the remembrance of the slaughter of his race. Ye children, while ye were destroying even the embryos of the Brigger race, this child was held by me in my thigh for 100 years. And in order that the prosperity of Brigger's race might be restored, the entire Vedas with their branches came unto this one even while he was in the womb. It is plain that this scion of the Brigger race, enraged at the slaughter of his fathers, desireth to slay you. It is by his celestial energy that your eyes have been scorched. Therefore, ye children, pray ye unto this my excellent child born of my thigh. Propitiated by your homage he may restore your eyesight. Vasishtha continued, hearing those words of the Brahmana lady, all these princes addressed the thigh-born child, saying, Be propitious. And the child became propitious unto them. And that best of Brahmana rishis, in consequence of his having been born after tearing open his mother's thigh, came to be known throughout the 3 worlds by the name of Orva, thigh-born. And those princes regaining their eyesight went away. But the Muni Orva of the Brigger race resolved upon overcoming the whole world. And the high-souled Rishi set his heart, O child, upon the destruction of every creature in the world. And that scion of the Brigger race, for paying homage, as he regarded, unto his slaughtered ancestors, devoted himself to the austerest of penances with the object of destroying the whole world. And desirous of gratifying his ancestors, the Rishi afflicted by his severe asceticism the 3 worlds with the celestials, the Asuras, and human beings. The Pitris, then, learning what the child of their race was about, all came from their own region unto the Rishi, and addressing him said, Orva, O son, fierce thou hast been in thy asceticism. Thy power hath been witnessed by us. Be propitious unto the 3 worlds. O, control thy wrath. O child, it was not from incapacity that the Briggers of souls under complete control were, all of them, indifferent to their own destruction at the hands of the murderous Kshatriyas. O child, when we grew weary of the long periods of life allotted to us, it was then that we desired our own destruction through the instrumentality of the Kshatriyas. The wealth that the Briggers had placed in their house underground had been placed only with the object of enraging the Kshatriyas and picking a quarrel with them. O thou best of Brahmanas, as we were desirous of heaven, of what use could wealth be to us? The treasurer of heaven, Kuvara, had kept a large treasure for us. When we found that death could not, by any means, overtake us all, it was then, O child, that we regarded this as the best means of compassing our desire. They who commit suicide never attain to regions that are blessed. Reflecting upon this, we abstained from self-destruction. That which, therefore, thou desirest to do is not agreeable to us. Restrain thy mind, therefore, from the sinful act of destroying the whole world. O child, destroy not the Kshatriyas nor the 7 worlds. O, kill this wrath of thine that staineth thy ascetic energy. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 182. The Gandharv said, Vasishtha after this, continued the narration saying, hearing these words of the Pitris, Orva, O child, replied unto them to this effect. Ye Pitris, the vow I have made from anger for the destruction of all the worlds, must not go in vain. I cannot consent to be one whose anger and vows are futile. Like fire consuming dry woods, this rage of mine will certainly consume me if I do not accomplish my vow. The man that represseth his wrath that hath been excited by adequate cause becometh incapable of duly compassing the 3 ends of life, viz., religion, profit, and pleasure. The wrath that kings desirous of subjugating the whole earth exhibit is not without its uses. It serveth to restrain the wicked and to protect the honest. While lying unborn within my mother's thigh, I heard the doleful cries of my mother and other women of the Brigger race who were then being exterminated by the Kshatriyas. Ye Pitris, when those wretches of Kshatriyas began to exterminate the Briggers together with unborn children of their race, it was then that wrath filled my soul. My mother and the other women of our race, each in an advanced state of pregnancy, and my father, while terribly alarmed, found not in all the worlds a single protector. Then when the Brigger women found not a single protector, my mother held me in one of her thighs. If there be a punisher of crimes in the worlds, no one in all the worlds would dare commit a crime. If he findeth not a punisher, the number of sinners becometh large. The man who having the power to prevent or punish sin doth not do so, knowing that a sin hath been committed, is himself defiled by that sin. When kings and others, capable of protecting my fathers, protect them not, postponing that duty, preferring the pleasures of life, I have just cause to be enraged with them. I am the Lord of the creation, capable of punishing its iniquity. I am incapable of obeying your command. Capable of punishing this crime, if I abstain from so doing, men will once more have to undergo a similar persecution. The fire of my wrath, too, that is ready to consume the worlds, if repressed, will certainly consume by its own energy my own self. Ye masters, I know that ye ever seek the good of the worlds. Direct me, therefore, as to what may benefit both myself and the worlds. Vasistha continued. The Pitris replied, saying, O, throw this fire that is born of thy wrath and that desireth to consume the worlds into the waters. That will do thee good. The worlds, indeed, are all dependent on water as their elementary cause. Every juicy substance containeth water. Indeed, the whole universe is made of water. Therefore, O thou best of Brahmanas, cast thou this fire of thy wrath into the waters. If, therefore, thou desirest it, O Brahmana, let this fire born of thy wrath abide in the great ocean, consuming the waters thereof, for it hath been said that the worlds are made of water. In this way, O thou sinless one, thy word will be rendered true, and the worlds with the gods will not be destroyed. Vasistha continued. Then, O child, Orva cast the fire of his wrath into the abode of Varuna. And that fire which consumeth the waters of the great ocean became like unto a large horse's head, which persons conversant with the Vedas call by the name of Vadavamukha. And emitting itself from that mouth it consumeth the waters of the mighty ocean. Blessed be thou. It behoveth not thee, therefore, to destroy the worlds. O thou Parasara, who art acquainted with the higher regions, thou foremost of wise men. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 183. The Gandharv continued. The Brahmana sage, Parasara, thus addressed by the illustrious Vasistha, restrained his wrath from destroying the worlds. But the Rishi Parasara, endued with great energy, the son of Saktri, the foremost of all persons acquainted with the Vedas, performed a grand Rakshasa sacrifice. And remembering the slaughter of his father, Saktri, the great Muni began to consume the Rakshasas, young and old, and the sacrifice he performed. And Vasistha did not restrain him from this slaughter of the Rakshasa, from the determination of not obstructing this second vow of his grandson. And in that sacrifice the great Muni Parasara sat before 3 blazing fires, himself like unto a 4th fire. And the son of Saktri, like the sun just emerging from the clouds, illuminated the whole firmament by that stainless sacrifice of his, into which large were the libations poured of clarified butter. Then Vasistha and the other rishis regarded that Muni blazing with his own energy as if he were the second sun. Then the great Rishi Atri, of liberal soul, desirous of ending that sacrifice, an achievement highly difficult for others, came to that place. And there also came, O thou slayer of all foes, Pulasatya and Pulaha, and Krata, the performer of many great sacrifices, all influenced by the desire of saving the Rakshasas. And, O thou bull of the Bharata race, Pulasatya then, seeing that many Rakshasas had already been slain, told these words unto Parasara, that oppressor of all enemies. There is no obstruction, I hope, to this sacrifice of thine, O child. Takest thou any pleasure, O child, in this slaughter of even all those innocent Rakshasas that know nothing of thy father's death? It behoveth thee not to destroy any creatures thus. This, O child, is not the occupation of a Brahmana devoted to asceticism. Peace is the highest virtue. Therefore, O Parasara, establish thou peace. How hast thou, O Parasara, being so superior, engaged thyself in such a sinful practice? It behoveth not thee to transgress against Saktri himself, who was well acquainted with all rules of morality. It behoveth not thee to extirpate any creatures. O descendant of Vasistha's race, that which befell thy father was brought about by his own curse. It was for his own fault that Saktri was taken hence unto heaven. O Muni, no Rakshasa was capable of devouring Saktri, he himself provided for his own death. And, O Parasara, Viswamitra was only a blind instrument in that matter. Both Saktri and Kalmashapada, having ascended to heaven, are enjoying great happiness. And the other sons also of the great Rishi Vasishtha, who were younger than Saktri, are even now enjoying themselves with the celestials. And, O child, O offspring of Vasishtha's son, thou hast also been, in this sacrifice, only an instrument in the destruction of these innocent Rakshasas. Oh, blessed be thou! Abandon this sacrifice of thine. Let it come to an end. The Gandharv continued, thus addressed by Pulasatya, as also by the intelligent Vasishtha, that mighty Muni the son of Saktri then brought that sacrifice to an end. And the Rishi cast the fire that he had ignited for the purpose of the Rakshas's sacrifice into the deep woods on the north of the Himavat. And that fire may be seen to this day consuming Rakshasas and trees and stones in all seasons. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 184. Arjuna asked, what for, O Gandharv, did King Kalmashapada command his queen to go unto that foremost of all persons conversant with the Vedas, the master Vasishtha? Why also did that illustrious and great Rishi Vasishtha himself, who was acquainted with every rule of morality, know a woman he should not have known? O friend, was this an act of sin on the part of Vasishtha? It behoveth thee to remove the doubts I entertain and refer to thee for solution. The Gandharv replied, saying, O irrepressible Dhananjaya, listen to me as I answer the question thou hast asked in respect of Vasishtha and King Kalmashapada, that cherisher of friends. O thou best of the Bharatas, I have told thee all about the curse of King Kalmashapada by Saktri, the illustrious son of Vasishtha. Brought under the influence of the curse, that smiter of all foes King Kalmashapada, with eyes whirling in anger, went out of his capital accompanied by his wife. And entering with his wife the solitary woods, the king began to wander about. And one day, while the king under the influence of the curse was wandering through that forest abounding in several kinds of deer and various other animals, and overgrown with numerous large trees and shrubs and creepers, and resounding with terrible cries, he became exceedingly hungry. And the monarch thereupon began to search for some food. Pinched with hunger, the king at last saw, in a very solitary part of the woods, a Brahmana and his wife enjoying each other. Alarmed at beholding the monarch, the couple ran away, their desire ungratified. Pursuing the retreating pair, the king forcibly seized the Brahmana. Then the Brahmani, beholding her lord seized, addressed the monarch, saying, Listen to what I say, O monarch of excellent vows. It is known all over the world that thou art born in the solar race, and that thou art ever vigilant in the practice of morality and devoted to the service of thy superiors. It behoveth thee not to commit sin, O thou irrepressible one, deprived though thou hast been of thy senses by the Rishis' curse. My season hath come, and wishful of my husband's company I was connected with him. I have not been gratified yet. Be propitious unto us, O thou best of kings. Liberate my husband. The monarch, however, without listening to her cries, cruelly devoured her husband like a tiger devouring its desirable prey. Possessed with wrath at this sight, the tears that woman shed blazed up like fire and consumed everything in that place. Afflicted with grief at the calamity that overtook her lord, the Brahmani in anger cursed the royal sage Kalmashapada, vile wretch, since thou hast today cruelly devoured under my very nose my illustrious husband dear unto me, even before my desires have been gratified, therefore shall thou, O wicked one afflicted by my curse, meet with instant death when thou goest in for thy wife in season. And thy wife, O wretch, shall bring forth a son uniting herself with that Rishi Vasishtha whose children have been devoured by thee. And that child, O worst of kings, shall be the perpetuator of thy race. And cursing the monarch thus, that lady of Angira's house bearing every auspicious mark, entered the blazing fire in the very sight of the monarch. And, O thou oppressor of all foes, the illustrious and exalted Vasishtha by his ascetic power and spiritual insight immediately knew all. And long after this, when the king became freed from his curse, he approached his wife Madhyanati when her season came. But Madhyanati softly sent him away. Under the influence of passion, the monarch had no recollection of that curse. Hearing, however, the words of his wife, the best of kings became terribly alarmed. And recollecting the curse, he repented bitterly of what he had done. It was for this reason, O thou best of men, that the monarch infected with the Brahmani's curse appointed Vasishtha to beget a son upon his queen. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 185. Arjuna asked, O Gandharv, thou art acquainted with everything. Tell us, therefore, which Veda-knowing Brahmana is worthy to be appointed as our priest. The Gandharv replied, There is in these woods a shrine of the name of Akachaka. Daumya, the younger brother of Devala, is engaged there in ascetic penances. Appoint him, if ye desire, your priest. Vaisampayana said, Then Arjuna, highly pleased with everything that had happened, gave unto that Gandharv his weapon of fire with befitting ceremonies. And addressing him, the Pandava also said, O thou best of Gandharvs, let the horses thou givest us remain with thee for a time. When the occasion cometh, we will take them from thee. Blessed be thou. Then the Gandharv and the Pandavas, respectfully saluting each other, left the delightful banks of the Bhagirathi and went wheresoever they desired. Then, O Bharata, the Pandavas going to Akachaka, the sacred asylum of Daumya, installed Daumya as their priest. And Daumya, the foremost of all conversant with the Vedas, receiving them with presents of wild fruits and edible roots, consented to become their priest. And the Pandavas with their mother forming the sixth of the company, having obtained that Brahmana as their priest, regarded their sovereignty and kingdom as already regained and the daughter of the Panchala king as already obtained in the Swayamvara. And those bulls of the Bharata race, having obtained the master Daumya as their priest, also regarded themselves as placed under a powerful protector. And the high-souled Daumya, acquainted with the true meaning of the Vedas and every rule of morality, becoming the spiritual preceptor of the virtuous Pandavas, made them his Yajamanas, spiritual disciples. And that Brahmana, beholding those heroes endued with intelligence and strength and perseverance like unto the celestials, regarded them as already restored, by virtue of their own accomplishments, to their sovereignty and kingdom. Then those kings of men, having had benedictions uttered upon them by that Brahmana, resolved to go, accompanied by him, to the Swayamvara of the princess of Panchala. Swayamvara Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 186. Vaisampayana said, Then those tigers among men, those brothers, the 5 Pandavas, set out for Panchala to behold that country and Draupadi and the festivities, and view of her marriage. And those tigers among men, those oppressors of all enemies, in going along with their mother, saw on the way numerous Brahmanas proceeding together. And those Brahmanas, who were all Brahmacharis, beholding the Pandavas, O king, asked them, Where are ye going to? Whence also are ye come? And Yudhishthira replied unto them, saying, Ye bulls among Brahmanas, know ye that we are uterine brothers proceeding together with our mother? We are coming even from Akachakra. The Brahmanas then said, Go ye this very day to the abode of Drupada in the country of the Panchalas. A great Swayamvara takes place there, on which a large sum of money will be spent. We also are proceeding thither. Let us all go together. Extraordinary festivities will take place in Drupada's abode. The illustrious Yajnasena, otherwise called Drupada, had a daughter risen from the center of the sacrificial altar. Of eyes like lotus petals and of faultless features endued with youth and intelligence, she is extremely beautiful. And the slender-waisted Draupadi, of every feature perfectly faultless, and whose body emitteth a fragrance like unto that of the blue lotus for 2 full miles around, is the sister of the strong-armed Drishtadyumna, gifted with great prowess, the would-be slayer of Drona, who was born with natural mail and sword and bow and arrows from the blazing fire, himself like unto the second fire. And that daughter of Yajnasena will select a husband from among the invited princes. And we are repairing thither to behold her and the festivities on the occasion, like unto the festivities of heaven. And to that Swayamvara will come from various lands kings and princes, who are performers of sacrifices, in which the presents to the Brahmanas are large, who are devoted to study, are holy, illustrious, and of rigid vows, who are young and handsome, and who are mighty car warriors and accomplished in arms. Desirous of winning the hand of the maiden, those monarchs will all give away much wealth and kind and food and other articles of enjoyment. And taking all they will give away and witnessing the Swayamvara and enjoying the festivities, we shall go wheresoever we like. And there will also come unto that Swayamvara from various countries, actors, and bards singing the panegyrics of kings, and dancers, and reciters of Puranas, and heralds, and powerful athletes. And beholding all these sights, and taking what will be given away to illustrious ones, ye will return with us. Ye are all handsome and like unto the celestials. Beholding you, Krishna may, by chance, choose some one amongst you superior to the rest. This thy brother of mighty arms and handsome and endued with beauty also, engaged in athletic encounters, may, by chance, earn great wealth. On hearing these words of the Brahmanas, Yudhishthira replied, Ye Brahmanas, we will all go with you to witness that maiden Swayamvar, that excellent jubilee. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 187. Vyasa said, thus addressed by the Brahmanas, the Pandavas, O Janamejaya, proceeded towards the country of the southern Panchalas ruled over by the king Drupada. And on their way those heroes beheld the illustrious Dwapayana, that Muni of pure soul, and perfectly sinless. And duly saluting the Rishi, and saluted by him, after their conversation was over, commanded by him they proceeded to Drupada's abode. And those mighty chariot fighters proceeded by slow stages, staying for some time within those beautiful woods, and by fine lakes that they beheld along their way. Devoted to study, pure in their practices, amiable, and sweet-speeched, the Pandavas at last entered the country of the Panchalas. And beholding the capital, as also the fort, they took up their quarters in the house of a potter. Adopting the Brahmanical profession, they began to lead an eleemosynary life. And no men recognized those heroes during their stay in Drupada's capital. Yajnasena always cherished the desire of bestowing his daughter on Kiriti, Arjuna, the son of Pandu. But he never spoke of it to anybody. And, O Janamejaya, the king of Panchala, thinking of Arjuna, caused a very stiff bow to be made that was incapable of being bent by any except Arjuna. Causing some machinery to be erected in the sky, the king set up a mark attached to that machinery. And Drupada said, He that will string this bow, and with these well-adorned arrows shoot the mark above the machine, shall obtain my daughter. Vyasa continued, with these words King Drupada proclaimed the Swayamvara. On hearing of them, O Bharata, the kings of other lands came to his capital. And there came also many illustrious rishis desirous of beholding the Swayamvara. And there came also, O king, Duryodhana and the Kurus accompanied by Kama. There also came many superior Brahmanas from every country. And the monarchs who came there were all received with reverence by the illustrious Drupada. Desirous of beholding the Swayamvara, the citizens, roaring like the sea, all took their seats on the platforms that were erected around the amphitheater. The monarch entered the grand amphitheater by the northeastern gate. And the amphitheater, which itself had been erected on an auspicious and level plain to the northeast of Drupada's capital, was surrounded by beautiful mansions. And it was enclosed on all sides with high walls and a moat with arched doorways here and there. The vast amphitheater was also shaded by a canopy of various colors. And resounding with the notes of thousands of trumpets, it was scented with black aloes and sprinkled all over with water mixed with sandal paste and decorated with garlands of flowers. It was surrounded with high mansions, perfectly white and resembling the cloud-kissing peaks of Kailasa. The windows of those mansions were covered with networks of gold, the walls were set with diamonds and precious, costly carpets and cloths. All those mansions, adorned with wreaths and garlands of flowers and rendered fragrant with excellent aloes, were all white and spotless, like unto the necks of swans. And the fragrance therefrom could be perceived from the distance of a yojana, 8 miles. And they were each furnished with 100 doors wide enough to admit a crowd of persons. They were adorned with costly beds and carpets, and beautified with various metals. They resembled the peaks of the Himavat. And in those 7-storied houses of various sizes dwelt the monarchs invited by Drupada, whose persons were adorned with every ornament and who were possessed with the desire of excelling one another. And the inhabitants of the city and the country who had come to behold Krishna and taken their seats on the excellent platforms erected around, beheld seated within those mansions those lions among kings who were all endued with the energy of great souls. And those exalted sovereigns were all adorned with the fragrant paste of the black aloe. Of great liberality, they were all devoted to Brahma, and they protected their kingdoms against all foes. and for their own good deeds they were loved by the whole world. The Pandavas, too, entering that amphitheater, sat with the Brahmanas and beheld the unequaled affluence of the king of the Panchalas. And that concourse of princes, Brahmanas, and others, looking gay at the performances of actors and dancers, large presents of every kind of wealth being constantly made, began to swell day by day. And it lasted, O king, several days, till on the 16th day, when it was at its full, the daughter of Drupada, O thou bull of the Bharata race, having washed herself clean, entered the amphitheater, richly attired and adorned with every ornament, and bearing in her hand a dish of gold, whereon were the usual offerings of arugya, and a garland of flowers. Then the priest of the lunar race, a holy Brahmana conversant with all mantras, ignited the sacrificial fire, and poured on it with due rites libations of clarified butter. And gratifying Agni by these libations, and making the Brahmanas utter the auspicious formula of benediction, stopped the musical instruments that were playing all around. And when that vast amphitheater, O monarch, became perfectly still, Drishtadyumna, possessed of a voice deep as the sound of the kettle drum or the clouds, taking hold of his sister's arm, stood in the midst of that concourse, and said, with a voice loud and deep as the roar of the clouds, these charming words of excellent import: Hear ye, assembled kings, this is the bow, that is the mark, and these are the arrows. Shoot the mark through the orifice of the machine with these 5 sharpened arrows. Truly do I say that, possessed of lineage, beauty of persons, and strength, whoever achieveth this great feat shall obtain today this my sister, Krishna, for his wife. Having thus spoken unto the assembled monarchs, Drupada's son then addressed his sister, reciting unto her the names and lineages and achievements of those assembled lords of the earth. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 188. Drishtadyumna said, Duryodhana, Durvisa, Dharmaka, and Dushpradharshana, Vivansati, Vikarna, Saha, and Dusasana, Yuyutsu, and Vayuvega, and Bhimavagarava, Ugrayuda, Valaki, Kanakayu, and Virakana, Sukundala, Chitrasena, Suvracha, and Kanakadwaja, Nandaka, and Vausali, and Tuhunda, and Vikata, these, O sister, and many other mighty sons of Dhritarashtra, all heroes accompanied by Karna, have come for thy hand. Innumerable other illustrious monarchs, all bulls among Kshatriyas, have also come for thee. Sakuni, Sauvala, Vrsaka, and Vrihadvala, these sons of the king Gandhara, have also come. Foremost of all wielders of weapons, the illustrious Aswathaman and Bhoja, adorned with every ornament, have also come for thee. Vrihanta, Manamana, Dandadara, Sadeva, Jayatsena, Megasandi, Virata with his 2 sons Sanka and Uttara, Vardhakshami, Susarma, Sinavindu, Suketu with his 2 sons Sunama and Suvracha, Suchitra, Sukumara, Vrika, Satyadriti, Suryadwaja, Roshamana, Nila, Chitrayuta, Aksaman, Chikatana, the mighty Srinaman, Chandrasena, the mighty son of Samadrasena, Jarasandha, Vedanda, and Danda the father and son, Pandraka, Vasudeva, Bhagadata, endued with great energy, Kalinga, Tamralipta, the king of Patana, the mighty Kar warrior Salya, the king of Madra, with his son, the heroic Ragmangada, Ragmaratha, Somadatta of the Kuru race, with his 3 sons, all mighty chariot fighters and heroes, viz., Buri, Burasrava, and Sala, Sudakshina, Kamvoja of the Puru race, Vrihadvala, Sashina, Sivi, the son of Usanara, Pacharanahanta, the king of Karusha, Sankarshana, Valadeva, Vasudeva, Krishna, the mighty son of Rukmini, Samva, Shiradeshna, the son of Pradyumna with Gada, Akrura, Satyaki, the high-souled Adhava, Kritavarman, the son of Hridika, Prathu, Viprathu, Viduratha, Kanka, Sanku with Gavshana, Asavaha, Anirudh, Samaka, Saramajaya, the heroic Vatapi Jili Pindaraka, the powerful Usanara, all these of the Vrishni race, Bhajaratha, Vrihakatra, Jayadratha the son of Sindhu, Vrihadratha, Valhika, the mighty charioteer Sruteu, Uluka, Kaitava, Chitrangada, and Suvangada, the highly intelligent Vatsaraja, the king of Kosala, Sasupala, and the powerful Jarasandha, these and many other great kings, all Kshatriyas celebrated throughout the world, have come, O blessed one, for thee. Endued with prowess, these will shoot the mark. And thou shalt choose him for thy husband, who amongst these will shoot the mark. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 189. Vyasa said, Then those youthful princes adorned with earrings, vying with one another and each regarding himself accomplished in arms and gifted with might, stood up brandishing their weapons. And intoxicated with pride of beauty, prowess, lineage, knowledge, wealth, and youth, they were like Himalayan elephants in the season of rut with crowns split from excess of temporal juice. And beholding each other with jealousy and influenced by the god of desire, they suddenly rose up from their royal seats, exclaiming, Krishna shall be mine. And the Kshatriyas assembled in that amphitheater, each desirous of winning the daughter of Drupada, looked like the celestial of old, standing round Uma, the daughter of the king of mountains. Afflicted with the shafts of the god of the flowery bough and with hearts utterly lost in the contemplation of Krishna, those princes descended into the amphitheater for winning the Panchala maiden and began to regard even their best friends with jealousy. And there came also the celestials on their cars, with the Rudras and the Adityas, the Vasus and the twin Ashwins, the Svadhas and all the Marutas, and Kuvara with Yama walking ahead. And there came also the Daityas and the Suparnas, the great Nagas and the celestial Rishis, the Guhyakas and the Charanas and Viswavesu and Narada and Parvata, and the principal Gandharvas with Apsaras. And Halayuda, Valadeva, and Janardana, Krishna, and the chief of the Vrishni, and Haka, and Yadava tribes who obeyed the leadership of Krishna were also there, viewing the scene. And beholding those elephants in Ratha 5, Pandavas, attracted towards Draupadi like mighty elephants towards a lake overgrown with lotuses, or like fire covered with ashes, Krishna the foremost of Yadu heroes began to reflect. And he said unto Rama, Valadeva, that is Yudhishthira, that is Bhima with Jishnu, Arjuna, and those are the twin heroes. And Rama surveying them slowly cast a glance of satisfaction at Krishna. Biting their nether lips in wrath, the other heroes, their sons and grandsons of kings with their eyes and hearts and thoughts set on Krishna, looked with expanded eyes on Draupadi alone without noticing the Pandavas. And the sons of Pritha also, of mighty arms, and the illustrious twin heroes, beholding Draupadi, were all likewise struck by the shafts of Kama. And crowded with celestial Rishis and Gandharvas and Suparnas and Nagas and Asuras and Siddhas, and filled with celestial perfumes, and scattered over with celestial flowers, and resounding with the kettle drum and the deep hum of infinite voices, and echoing with the softer music of the flute, the veena, and the tabor, the cars of the celestials could scarcely find a passage through the firmament. Then those princes Karna, Duryodhana, Sulwa, Salya, Aswathaman, Kratha, Sunitha, Vakra, the ruler of Kalinga and Bunga, Pundya, Pandra, the ruler of Videha, the chief of the Yavnas, and many other sons and grandsons of kings, sovereigns of territories with eyes like lotus petals, one after another began to exhibit prowess for winning that maiden of unrivaled beauty. Adorned with crowns, garlands, bracelets, and other ornaments, endued with mighty arms, possessed of prowess and vigor and bursting with strength and energy, those princes could not, even in imagination, string that bow of extraordinary stiffness. And, some amongst, those kings in exerting with swelling lips each according to his strength, education, skill, and energy to string that bow, were tossed on the ground and laid perfectly motionless for some time. Their strength spent and their crowns and garlands loosened from their persons, they began to pant for breath and their ambition of winning that fair maiden was cooled. Tossed by that tough bow, and their garlands and bracelets and other ornaments disordered, they began to utter exclamations of woe. And that assemblage of monarchs, their hope of obtaining Krishna gone, looked sad and woeful. And beholding the plight of those monarchs, Karna, that foremost of all wielders of the bow, went to where the bow was, and quickly raising it strung it and placed the arrows on the string. And beholding the son of Suryakarna of the Sudha tribe like unto fire, or Soma, or Surya himself, resolved to shoot the mark, those foremost of bowmen the sons of Pandu regarded the mark as already shot and brought down upon the ground. But seeing Karna, Draupadi loudly said, I will not select a Sudha for my lord. Then Karna, laughing in vexation and casting glance at the sun, threw aside the bow already drawn to a circle. Then when all those Kshatriyas gave up the task, the heroic king of the Ketis mighty as Yama, Pluto, himself the illustrious and determined Sasupala, the son of Damagosa, and endeavoring to string the bow, himself fell upon his knees on the ground. Then King Jarasandha, endued with great strength and powers, approaching the bow, stood there for some moment, fixed and motionless like a mountain. Tossed by the bow, he too fell upon his knees on the ground, and rising up, the monarch left the amphitheater returning to his kingdom. Then the great hero Salya, the king of Madra, endued with great strength, and endeavoring to string the bow, fell upon his knees on the ground. At last, when in that assemblage consisting of highly respectable people, all the monarchs had become subjects of derisive talk, that foremost of heroes Jishnu, the son of Kunti, desired to string the bow and placed the arrows on the bowstring. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 190. Vyasa continued, when all the monarchs had desisted from stringing that bow, the high-souled Jishnu arose from among the crowd of Brahmanas seated in that assembly. And beholding Partha possessing the complexion of Indra's banner, advancing towards the bow, the principal Brahmanas, shaking their deerskins, raised a loud clamor. And while some were displeased, there were others that were well pleased. And some there were, possessed of intelligence and foresight, who addressing one another said, Ye Brahmanas, how can a Brahmana stripling unpracticed in arms and weak in strength, string that bow which such celebrated Kshatriyas as Salya and others, endued with might and accomplished in the science and practice of arms, could not? If he doth not achieve success in this untried task which he hath undertaken from a spirit of boyish unsteadiness, the entire body of Brahmanas here will be rendered ridiculous in the eyes of the assembled monarchs. Therefore, forbid this Brahmana that he may not go to string the bow which he is even now desirous of doing from vanity, childish daring, or mere unsteadiness. Others replied, We shall not be made ridiculous, nor shall we incur the disrespect of anybody or the displeasure of the sovereigns. Some remarked, This handsome youth is even like the trunk of a mighty elephant, whose shoulders and arms and thighs are so well built, who in patience looks like the Himavat, whose gait is even like that of the lion, and whose prowess seems to be like that of an elephant in rut, and who is so resolute that it is probable that he will accomplish this feat. He has strength and resolution. If he had none, he would never go of his own accord. Besides, there is nothing in the three worlds that Brahmanas of all moral men cannot accomplish. Abstaining from all food or living upon air or eating of fruits, persevering in their vows, and emaciated and weak, Brahmanas are ever strong in their own energy. One should never disregard a Brahmana whether his acts be right or wrong, by supposing him incapable of achieving any task that is great or little, or that is fraught with bliss or woe. Rama the son of Jamadagni defeated in battle all the Kshatriyas. Agastya by his Brahma energy drank off the fathomless ocean. Therefore, say ye, let this youth bend the bow and string it with ease, and many said, So be it. And the Brahmanas continued speaking unto one another these and other words. Then Arjuna approached the bow and stood there like a mountain. And walking round that bow, and bending his head unto the giver of boons the Lord Isana, and remembering Krishna also, he took it up. And that bow which Rukma, Sunitha, Vakra, Radha's son, Duryodhana, Salya, and many other kings accomplished in the science and practice of arms, could not even with great exertion string Arjuna, the son of Indra, that foremost of all persons endued with energy and like unto the younger brother of Indra, Vishnu, in might, strung in the twinkling of an eye. And taking up the 5 arrows he shot the mark and caused it to fall down on the ground through the hole in the machine above which it had been placed. Then there arose a loud uproar in the firmament, and the amphitheater also resounded with a loud clamor. And the gods showered celestial flowers on the head of Partha the slayer of foes. And thousands of Brahmanas began to wave their upper garments in joy. And all around, the monarchs who had been unsuccessful uttered exclamations of grief and despair. And flowers were rained from the skies all over the amphitheater. And the musicians struck up in concert. Bards and heralds began to chant in sweet tones the praises of the hero who accomplished the feat. And beholding Arjuna, Drupada that slayer of foes was filled with joy. And the monarch desired to assist with his forces the hero if the occasion arose. And when the uproar was at its height, Yudhishthira, the foremost of all virtuous men, accompanied by those first of men the twins, hastily left the amphitheater for returning to his temporary home. And Krishna, beholding the mark shot and beholding Partha also like unto Indra himself, who had shot the mark, was filled with joy, and approached the son of Kunti with a white robe and a garland of flowers. And Arjuna, the accomplisher of inconceivable feats, having won Draupadi by his success in the amphitheater, was saluted with reverence by all the Brahmanas. And he soon after left the lists followed close by her, who thus became his wife. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 191. Vyasa said, when the king, Drupada, expressed his desire of bestowing his daughter on that Brahmana who had shot the mark, all those monarchs who had been invited to the Swayamvara, looking at one another, were suddenly filled with wrath. And they said, passing us by and treating the assembled monarchs as straw, this Drupada desireth to bestow his daughter, that first of women, on a Brahmana. Having planted the tree, he cutteth it down when it is about to bear fruit. The rich regardeth us not, therefore let us slay him. He deserveth not our respect nor the veneration due to age. Owing to such qualities of his, we shall, therefore, slay this wretch that insulteth all kings, along with his son. Inviting all the monarchs and entertaining them with excellent food, he disregardeth us at last. In this assemblage of monarchs, like unto a conclave of the celestials, doth he not see a single monarch equal unto himself? The Vedic declaration is well known that the Swayamvara is for the Kshatriyas. The Brahmanas have no claim in respect of a selection of husband by a Kshatriya damsel. Or, ye kings, if this damsel desireth not to select any one of us as her lord, let us cast her into the fire and return to our kingdoms. As regards this Brahmana, although he hath, from officiousness or avarice, done this injury to the monarchs, he should not yet be slain, for our kingdoms, lives, treasures, sons, grandsons, and whatever other wealth we have, all exist for Brahmanas. Something must be done here, even unto him, so that from fear of disgrace and the desire of maintaining what properly belongeth unto each order, other Swayamvaras may not terminate in this way. Having addressed one another thus, those tigers among monarchs endued with arms like unto spiked iron maces, took up their weapons and rushed at Drupada to slay him then and there. And Drupada, beholding those monarchs all at once rushing towards him in anger with bows and arrows, sought, from fear, the protection of the Brahmanas. But those mighty bowmen, Bhima and Arjuna, of the Pandavas, capable of chastising all foes, advanced to oppose those monarchs rushing towards them impetuously like elephants in the season of rut. Then the monarchs with gloved fingers and upraised weapons rushed in anger at the Kuru princes, Bhima and Arjuna, to slay them. Then the mighty Bhima, of extraordinary achievements, endued with the strength of thunder, tore up like an elephant a large tree and divested it of its leaves. And with that tree, the strong-armed Bhima, the son of Pritha, that grinder of foes, stood, like unto the mace-bearing king of the dead, Yama, armed with his fierce mace, near Arjuna, that bull amongst men. And beholding that feat of his brother, Jishnu, of extraordinary intelligence, himself also of inconceivable feats, wondered much. And equal unto Indra himself in achievements, shaking off all fear, he stood with his bow ready to receive those assailants. And beholding those feats of both Jishnu and his brother, Damodara, Krishna, of superhuman intelligence and inconceivable feats, addressing his brother, Halayuda, Valadeva, of fierce energy, said, that hero there, of tread like that of a mighty lion, who draweth the large bow in his hand 4 full cubits in length, is Arjuna. There is no doubt, O Sankarsana, about this, if I am Vasudeva. That other hero who, having speedily torn up the tree, hath suddenly become ready to drive off the monarchs, is Vrikodara. For no one in the world, except Vrikodara, could today perform such a feat in the field of battle. And that other youth of eyes like unto lotus petals, of full 4 cubits height, of gait like that of a mighty lion, and humble withal, of fair complexion and prominent and shining nose, who had, a little before, left the amphitheater, is Dharma's son, Yudhishthira. The 2 other youths, like unto Kartikeya, are, I suspect, the sons of the twin Ashwins. I heard that the sons of Pandu, along with their mother Pritha, had all escaped from the conflagration of the house of Lak. Then Halayuda, of complexion like unto that of clouds uncharged with rain, addressing his younger brother, Krishna, said with great satisfaction, "Oh, I am happy to hear, as I do from sheer good fortune, that our father's sister Pritha with the foremost of the Kaurava princes have all escaped from death." Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 192. Vyasa said, Then those bulls among Brahmanas, shaking their deerskins and water pots made of coconut shells, exclaimed, Fear not, we will fight the foe. Arjuna, smilingly addressing those Brahmanas exclaiming thus, said, Stand ye aside as spectators of the fray, showering hundreds of arrows furnished with straight points, even I shall check, like snakes with mantras, all those angry monarchs. Having said this, the mighty Arjuna, taking up the bow he had obtained as dower, accompanied by his brother Bhima, stood immovable as a mountain. And beholding those Kshatriyas who were ever furious in battle with Karna ahead, the heroic brothers rushed fearlessly at them like two elephants rushing against a hostile elephant. Then those monarchs eager for the fight fiercely exclaimed, The slaughter in battle of one desiring to fight is permitted. And saying this, the monarchs suddenly rushed against the Brahmanas. And Karna, endued with great energy, rushed against Jishnu for fight. And Salya, the mighty king of Madra, rushed against Bhima like an elephant rushing against another for the sake of a she-elephant in heat, while Duryodhana and others, engaged with the Brahmanas, skirmished with them lightly and carelessly. Then the illustrious Arjuna, beholding Karna, the son of Vikartana, Surya, advancing towards him, drew his tough bow and pierced him with his sharp arrows. And the impetus of those whetted arrows, furnished with fierce energy, made Radheya, Karna, faint. Recovering consciousness, Karna attacked Arjuna with greater care than before. Then Karna and Arjuna, both foremost of victorious warriors, desirous of vanquishing each other, fought madly on. And such was the lightness of hand they both displayed that, each enveloped by the other's shower of arrows, they both became invisible unto the spectators of their encounter. Behold the strength of my arms, mark how I have counteracted that feat. Those were the words intelligible to heroes alone in which they addressed each other. And incensed at finding the strength and energy of Arjuna's arms unequaled on the earth, Karna, the son of Surya, fought with greater vigor. And parrying all those impetuous arrows shot at him by Arjuna, Karna sent up a loud shout. And this feat of his was applauded by all the warriors. Then addressing his antagonist, Karna said, O thou foremost of Brahmanas, I am gratified to observe the energy of thy arms that knoweth no relaxation in battle, and thy weapons themselves fit for achieving victory. Art thou the embodiment of the science of weapons, or art thou Rama, that best of Brahmanas, or Indra himself, or Indra's younger brother Vishnu, called also Achyuta, who for disguising himself hath assumed the form of a Brahmana, and mustering such energy of arms fighteth with me? No other person except the husband himself of Sachi or Kiriti, the son of Pandu, is capable of fighting with me when I am angry on the field of battle. Then hearing those words of his, Fulgana replied, saying, O Karna, I am neither the science of arms, personified, nor Rama endued with superhuman powers. I am only a Brahmana who is the foremost of all warriors and all wielders of weapons. By the grace of my preceptor I have become accomplished in the Brahma and the Purandara weapons. I am here to vanquish thee in battle. Therefore, O hero, wait a little. Vyasa continued, thus addressed, by Arjuna, Karna the adopted son of Radha desisted from the fight, for that mighty chariot fighter thought that Brahma energy is ever invincible. Meanwhile, on another part of the field, the mighty heroes Salya and Vrikotara, well skilled in battle and possessed of great strength and proficiency, challenging each other, engaged in fight like two elephants in rut. And they struck each other with their clenched fists and knees. And sometimes pushing each other forward, and sometimes dragging each other near, sometimes throwing each other down, face downward, and sometimes on the sides, they fought on, striking each other at times with their clenched fists, and encountering each other with blows hard as the clash of two masses of granite. The lists rang with the sounds of their combat. Fighting with each other thus for a few seconds, Bhima, the foremost of the Kuru heroes, taking up Salya on his arms, hurled him to a distance. And Bhimasena, that bull amongst men, surprised all by the dexterity of his feet, for though he threw Salya on the ground, he did it without hurting him much. And when Salya was thus thrown down and Karna was struck with fear, the other monarchs were all alarmed. And they hastily surrounded Bhima and exclaimed, Surely these bulls amongst Brahmanas are excellent warriors. Ascertain in what race they have been born and where they abide. Who can encounter Karna, the son of Radha, in fight, except Rama or Drona or Kiriti, the son of Pandu? Who also can encounter Duryodhana in battle except Krishna, the son of Devki, and Kripa, the son of Saradwan? Who also can overthrow in battle Salya, that first of mighty warriors, except the hero Valadeva or Vrkodara, the son of Pandu, or the heroic Duryodhana? Let us, therefore, desist from this fight with the Brahmanas. Indeed, Brahmanas, however offending, should yet be ever protected. And first let us ascertain who these are, for after we have done that we may cheerfully fight with them. Vaisampayana continued, and Krishna, having beheld that feat of Bhima, believed them both to be the son of Kunti. And gently addressing the assembled monarchs, saying, "This maiden hath been justly acquired by the Brahmana," he induced them to abandon the fight. Accomplished in battle, those monarchs then desisted from the fight. And those best of monarchs then returned to their respective kingdoms, wondering much. And those who had come there went away saying, "The festive scene hath terminated in the victory of the Brahmanas. The princess of Panchala hath become the bride of a Brahmana." And surrounded by Brahmanas dressed in skins of deer and other wild animals, Bhima and Dhananjaya passed with difficulty out of the throng. And those heroes among men, mingled by the enemy and followed by Krishna, on coming at last out of that throng, looked like the full moon and the sun emerging from the clouds. Meanwhile Kunti, seeing that her sons were late in returning from their eleemosynary round, was filled with anxiety. She began to think of various evils having overtaken her sons. At one time she thought that the sons of Dhritarashtra, having recognized her sons, had slain them. Next she feared that some cruel and strong Rakshasas endued with powers of deception had slain them. And she asked herself, could the illustrious Vyasa himself, who had directed my sons to come to Panchala, have been guided by perverse intelligence? Thus reflected Pritha in consequence of her affection for her offspring. Then in the stillness of the late afternoon, Jishnu, accompanied by a body of Brahmanas, entered the abode of the potter, like the cloud-covered sun appearing on a cloudy day. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 193. Vaisampayana said, Then those illustrious sons of Pritha, on returning to the potter's abode, approached their mother. And those first of men represented Yajnasini unto their mother as the alms they had obtained that day. And Kunti, who was there within the room and saw not her sons, replied, saying, Enjoy ye all what ye have obtained. The moment after, she beheld Krishna, and then she said, Oh, what have I said? And anxious from fear of sin, and reflecting how every one could be extricated from the situation, she took the cheerful Yajnasini by the hand, and approaching Yudhishthira said, The daughter of King Yajnasena, upon being represented to me by thy younger brothers as the alms they had obtained, from ignorance, O king, I said what was proper, viz., Enjoy ye all what hath been obtained. O thou bull of the Kuru race, tell me how my speech may not become untrue, how sin may not touch the daughter of the king of Panchala, and how also she may not become uneasy. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed by his mother, that hero among men, that foremost scion of the Kuru race, the intelligent king, Yudhishthira, reflecting for a moment, consoled Kunti, and addressing the Dhananjaya, said, By thee, O Fulgana, hath Yajnasini been won. It is proper, therefore, that thou shouldst wed her. O thou withstander of all foes, igniting the sacred fire, take thou her hand with due rites. Arjuna, hearing this, replied, O king, do not make me a participator in sin. Thy behest is not conformable to virtue. That is the path followed by the sinful. Thou shouldst wed first, then the strong-armed Bhima of inconceivable feats, then myself, then Nakula, and last of all, Sadeva endued with great activity. Both Vrkodara and myself, and the twins and this maiden also, all await, O monarch, thy commands. When such is the state of things, do that, after reflection, which would be proper, and conformable virtue, and productive of fame, and beneficial unto the king of Panchala. All of us are obedient to thee. Oh, command us as thou likest. Vaisampayana continued, hearing these words of Jishnu, so full of respect and affection, the Pandavas all cast their eyes upon the princess of Panchala. And the princess of Panchala also looked at them all. And casting their glances on the illustrious Krishna, those princes looked at one another. And taking their seats, they began to think of Draupadi alone. Indeed, after those princes of immeasurable energy had looked at Draupadi, the god of desire invaded their hearts and continued to crush all their senses. As the lavishing beauty of Panchali, who had been modeled by the Creator himself, was superior to that of all other women on earth, it could captivate the heart of every creature. And Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, beholding his younger brothers, understood what was passing in their minds. And that bull among men immediately recollected the words of Krishna Dwaipayana. And the king, then, from fear of a division amongst the brothers, addressing all of them, said, "The auspicious Draupadi shall be the common wife of us all." Vyasa continued, "The sons of Pandu, then, hearing those words of their eldest brother, began to revolve them in their minds in great cheerfulness. The hero of the Vrishni race, Krishna, suspecting the 5 persons he had seen at the Swayamvara to be none else than the heroes of the Kuru race, came accompanied by the son of Rohini, Valadeva, to the house of the potter where those foremost of men had taken up their quarters. On arriving there, Krishna and Valadeva beheld seated in that potter's house Ajatasanu, Yudhishthira, of well-developed and long arms, and his younger brothers passing the splendor of fires sitting around him. Then Vasudeva, approaching that foremost of virtuous men, the son of Kunti, and touching the feet of that prince of the Ajamata race, said, "I am Krishna." And the son of Rohini, Valadeva, also approaching Yudhishthira, did the same. And the Pandavas, beholding Krishna and Valadeva, began to express great delight. And, O thou foremost of the Bharata race, those heroes of the Yadu race thereafter touched also the feet of Kunti, their father's sister. And Ajatasatru, that foremost of the Kuru race, beholding Krishna, inquired after his well-being and asked, "How, O Vasudeva, hast thou been able to trace us, as we are living in disguise?" And Vasudeva smilingly answered, "O king, fire, even if it is covered, can be known. Who else among men than the Pandavas could exhibit such might? Ye resistors of all foes, ye sons of Pandu, by sheer good fortune have ye escaped from that fierce fire. And it is by sheer good fortune alone that the wicked son of Dhritarashtra and his counselors have not succeeded in accomplishing their wishes. Blessed be ye! And grow ye in prosperity like a fire in a cave, gradually growing and spreading itself all around. And lest any of the monarchs recognize ye, let us return to our tent." Then, obtaining Yudhishthira's leave, Krishna of prosperity, knowing no decrease, accompanied by Valadeva, hastily went away from the potter's abode. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 194. Vyasa said, when the Kuru princes, Bhima and Arjuna, were wending towards the abode of the potter, Drishtadyumna, the Panchala prince, followed them. And sending away all his attendants, he concealed himself in some part of the potter's house, unknown to the Pandavas. Then Bhima, that grinder of all foes, and Jishnu, and the illustrious twins, on returning from their eleemosynary round in the evening, cheerfully gave everything unto Yudhishthira. Then the kind-hearted Kunti, addressing the daughter of Drupada, said, "O amiable one, take thou first a portion from this and devote it to the gods, and give it away to Brahmanas, and feed those that desire to eat, and give unto those who have become our guests. Divide the rest into 2 halves. Give one of these unto Bhima, O amiable one, for this strong youth of fair complexion, equal unto a king of elephants, this hero always eateth much. And divide the other half into 6 parts, for these youths, 1 for myself, and 1 for thee." Then the princess, hearing those instructive words of her mother-in-law, cheerfully did all that she had been directed to do. And those heroes then all ate of the food prepared by Krishna. Then Sadeva, the son of Madri, endued with great activity, spread on the ground a bed of kusa grass. Then those heroes, each spreading thereon his deerskin, laid themselves down to sleep. And those foremost of the Kuru princes lay down with heads towards the south. And Kunti laid herself down along the line of their heads, and Krishna along that of their feet. And Krishna, though she lay with the sons of Pandu on that bed of kusa grass along the line of their feet, as if she were their nether pillow, grieved not in her heart nor thought disrespectfully of those bulls amongst the Kurus. Then those heroes began to converse with one another. And the conversations of those princes, each worthy to lead an army, was exceedingly interesting, they being upon celestial cars, and weapons, and elephants, and swords, and arrows, and battle-axes. And the son of the Panchala king listened, from his place of concealment, unto all they said. And all those who were with him beheld Krishna in that state. When morning came, the prince Drishtadyumna set out from his place of concealment with great haste in order to report to Drupada in detail all that had happened at the potter's abode and all that he had heard those heroes speak amongst themselves during the night. The king of Panchala had been sad because he knew not the Pandavas as those who had taken away his daughter. And the illustrious monarch asked Drishtadyumna on his return, "Oh, where hath Krishna gone? Who hath taken her away? Hath any Sudra or anybody of mean descent, or hath a tribute-paying Vaishya by taking my daughter away, placed his dirty foot on my head? O son, hath that wreath of flowers been thrown away on a graveyard? Hath any Kshatriya of high birth, or any one of the superior order, Brahmana, obtained my daughter? Hath any one of mean descent, by having won Krishna, placed his left foot on my head? I would not, O son, grieve but feel greatly happy, if my daughter hath been united with Partha that foremost of men. O thou exalted one, tell me truly who hath won my daughter today? Oh, are the sons of that foremost of Kurus, Vichitravirya's son, alive? Was it Partha, Arjuna, that took up the bow and shot the mark? Vaivahika Parva. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 195. Vyasa said, thus addressed Drishtadyumna, that foremost of the lunar princes, cheerfully said unto his father all that had happened and by whom Krishna had been won. And the prince said, with large, red eyes, attired in deerskin, and resembling a celestial in beauty, the youth who strung that foremost of bows and brought down to the ground the mark set on high, was soon surrounded by the foremost of Brahmanas who also offered him their homage for the feat he had achieved. Incapable of bearing the sight of a foe and endued with great activity, he began to exert his prowess. And surrounded by the Brahmanas he resembled the thunder-wielding Indra standing in the midst of the celestials and the rishis. And like a she-elephant following the leader of a herd, Krishna cheerfully followed that youth catching hold of his deerskin. Then when the assembled monarchs incapable of bearing that sight rose up in wrath and advanced for fight, there rose up another hero who tearing up a large tree rushed at that concourse of kings, felling them right and left like Yama himself smiting down creatures endued with life. Then, O monarch, the assembled kings stood motionless and looked at that couple of heroes, while they, resembling the sun and the moon, taking Krishna with them, left the amphitheater and went into the abode of a potter in the suburbs of the town, and there at the potter's abode sat a lady like unto a flame of fire who, I think, is their mother. And around her also sat 3 other foremost of men, each of whom was like unto fire. And the couple of heroes having approached her paid homage unto her feet, and they said unto Krishna also to do the same. And keeping Krishna with her, those foremost of men all went the round of eleemosynary visits. Some time after when they returned, Krishna taking from them what they had obtained as alms, devoted a portion thereof to the gods, and gave another portion away, in gift, to Brahmanas. And of what remained after this, she gave a portion to that venerable lady, and distributed the rest amongst those 5 foremost of men. And she took a little for herself, and ate it last of all. Then, O monarch, they all laid themselves down for sleep, Krishna lying along the line of their feet as their nether pillow. And the bed on which they lay was made of kusa grass, upon which was spread their deerskins. And before going to sleep they talked on diverse subjects in voices deep as of black clouds. The talk of those heroes indicated them to be neither Vaishyas nor Sudras nor Brahmanas. Without doubt, O monarch, they are bulls amongst Kshatriyas, their discourse having been on military subjects. It seems, O father, that our hope hath been fructified, for we have heard that the sons of Kunti all escaped from the conflagration of the house of Lak. From the way in which the mark was shot down by that youth, and the strength with which the bow was strung by him, and the manner in which I have heard them talk with one another proves conclusively, O monarch, that they are the sons of Pritha wandering in disguise. Hearing these words of his son, King Drupada became exceedingly glad, and he sent unto them his priest directing him to ascertain who they were and whether they were the sons of the illustrious Pandu. Thus directed, the king's priest went unto them and applauding them all, delivered the king's message duly, saying, Ye who are worthy of preference in everything, the boon-giving king of the earth Drupada is desirous of ascertaining who ye are. Beholding this one who hath shot down the mark, his joy knoweth no bounds. Giving us all particulars of your family and tribe, place ye your feet on the heads of your foes, and gladden the hearts of the king of Panchala mid his men and mine also. King Pandu was the dear friend of Drupada and was regarded by him as his counterself. And Drupada had all along cherished the desire of bestowing this daughter of his upon Pandu as his daughter-in-law. Ye heroes of features perfectly faultless, King Drupada hath all along cherished this desire in his heart, that Arjuna of strong and long arms might wed this daughter of his according to the ordinance. If that hath become possible, nothing could be better, nothing more beneficial, nothing more conducive to fame and virtue, so far as Drupada is concerned. Having said this, the priest remained silent and humbly waited for an answer. Beholding him sitting thus, the king Yudhishthira commanded Bhima, who sat near, saying, Let water to wash his feet with and the aragya be offered unto this Brahmana. He is King Drupada's priest and, therefore, worthy of great respect. We should worship him with more than ordinary reverence. Then, O monarch, Bhima did as directed. Accepting the worship thus offered unto him, the Brahmana with a joyous heart sat at his ease. Then Yudhishthira addressed him and said, The king of the Panchalas hath, by fixing a special kind of dower, given away his daughter according to the practice of his order and not freely. This hero hath, by satisfying that demand, won the princess. King Drupada, therefore, hath nothing now to say in regard to the race, tribe, family, and disposition of him who hath performed that feat. Indeed, all his queries have been answered by the stringing of the bow and the shooting down of the mark. It is by doing what he had directed that this illustrious hero hath brought away Krishna from among the assembled monarchs. In these circumstances, the king of the lunar race should not indulge in any regrets which can only make him unhappy without mending matters in the least. The desire that King Drupada hath all along cherished will be accomplished for his handsome princess, who beareth, I think, every auspicious mark. None that is weak in strength could string that bow, and none of mean birth and unaccomplished in arms could have shot down the mark. It behoveth not, therefore, the king of the Panchalas to grieve for his daughter today. Nor can anybody in the world undo that act of shooting down the mark. Therefore the king should not grieve for what must take its course. While Yudhishthira was saying all this, another messenger from the king of the Panchalas, coming thither in haste, said, The nuptial feast is ready. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 196. Vyasa continued, the messenger said, King Drupada hath, in view of his daughter's nuptials, prepared a good feast for the bridegroom's party. Come ye thither after finishing your daily rites. Krishna's wedding will take place there. Delay ye not. These cars adorned with golden lotuses drawn by excellent horses are worthy of kings. Riding on them, come ye into the abode of the king of the Panchalas. Vyasa continued, Then those bulls among the Kurus, dismissing the priest and causing Kunti and Krishna to ride together on one of those cars, themselves ascended those splendid vehicles and proceeded towards Drupada's place. Meanwhile, O Bharata, hearing from his priest the words that Yudhishthira had said, King Drupada, in order to ascertain the order to which those heroes belonged, kept ready a large collection of articles required by the ordinance for the wedding of each of the four orders. And he kept ready fruits, sanctified garlands, and coats of mail, and shields, and carpets, and kine, and seeds, and various other articles and implements of agriculture. And the king also collected, O monarch, every article appertaining to other arts, and various implements and apparatus of every kind of sport. And he also collected excellent coats of mail and shining shields, and swords and scimitars, of fine temper, and beautiful chariots and horses, and first-class bows and well-adorned arrows, and various kinds of missiles ornamented with gold. And he also kept ready darts and rockets and battle-axes and various utensils of war. And there were in that collection beds and carpets and various fine things, and cloths of various sorts. When the party went to Drupada's abode, Kunti, taking with her the virtuous Krishna, entered the inner apartments of the king. The ladies of the king's household with joyous hearts worshipped the queen of the Kurus. Beholding, O monarch, those foremost of men, each possessing the sportive gait of the lion, with deerskins for their upper garments, eyes like unto those of mighty bulls, broad shoulders, and long hanging arms like unto the bodies of mighty snakes, the king, and the king's ministers, and the king's son, and the king's friends and attendants, all became exceedingly glad. Those heroes sat on excellent seats, furnished with footstools without any awkwardness and hesitation. And those foremost of men sat with perfect fearlessness on those costly seats, one after another according to the order of their ages. After those heroes were seated, well-dressed servants male and female, and skillful cooks brought excellent and costly viands worthy of kings on gold and silver plates. Then those foremost of men dined on those dishes and became well pleased. And after the dinner was over, those heroes among men, passing over all other articles, began to observe with interest the various utensils of war. Beholding this, Drupada's son and Drupada himself, along with all his chief ministers of state, understanding the sons of Kunti to be all of royal blood, became exceedingly glad. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 197. Vyasa said, Then the illustrious king of Panchala, addressing Prince Yudhishthira in the form applicable to Brahmanas, cheerfully inquired of that illustrious son of Kunti, saying, Are we to know you as Kshatriyas, or Brahmanas, or are we to know you as celestials who, disguising themselves as Brahmanas, are ranging the earth and come hither for the hand of Krishna? O tell us truly, for we have great doubts. Shall we not be glad when our doubts have been removed? O chastiser of enemies, have the fates been propitious unto us? Tell us the truth willingly. Truth becometh monarchs better than sacrifices and dedications of tanks. Therefore, tell us not what is untrue. O thou of the beauty of a celestial, O chastiser of foes, hearing thy reply I shall make arrangements for my daughter's wedding according to the order to which ye belong. Hearing these words of Drupada, Yudhishthira answered, saying, Be not cheerless, O king, let joy fill thy heart. The desire cherished by thee hath certainly been accomplished. We are Kshatriyas, O king, and sons of the illustrious Pandu. Know me to be the eldest of the sons of Kunti, and these to be Bhima and Arjuna. By these, O king, was thy daughter won amid the concourse of monarchs. The twins, Nakula and Sadeva, and Kunti wait where Krishna is. O bull amongst men, let grief be driven from thy heart, for we are Kshatriyas. Thy daughter, O monarch, hath like a lotus been transferred only from one lake into another. O king, thou art our revered superior and chief refuge. I have told thee the whole truth. Vyasa continued, hearing those words, the king Drupada's eyes rolled in ecstasy. And, filled with delight, the king could not, for some moments, answer Yudhishthira. Checking his emotion with great effort, that chastiser of foes at last replied unto Yudhishthira in proper words. The virtuous monarch inquired how the Pandavas had escaped from the town of Varanavada. The son of Pandu told the monarch every particular in detail of their escape from the burning palace of Lak. Hearing everything that the son of Kunti said, King Drupada censured Dhritarashtra, that ruler of men. And the monarch gave every assurance unto Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti. And that foremost of eloquent men then and there vowed to restore Yudhishthira to his paternal throne. Then Kunti and Krishna and Bhima and Arjuna and the twins, commanded by the king, to reside there, treated by Yajnasena with due respect. Then King Drupada with his sons, assured by all that had happened, approaching Yudhishthira, said, O thou of mighty arms, let the Kuru prince Arjuna take with due rites the hand of my daughter on this auspicious day, and let him, therefore, perform the usual initiatory rites of marriage. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of Drupada, the virtuous king Yudhishthira replied, saying, O great king, I also shall have to marry. Hearing him, Drupada said, If it pleaseth thee, take thou the hand of my daughter thyself with due rites. Or, give Krishna in marriage unto whomsoever of thy brothers thou likest. Yudhishthira said, Thy daughter, O king, shall be the common wife of us all. Even thus it hath been ordered, O monarch, by our mother. I am unmarried still, and Bhima also is so amongst the sons of Pandu. This thy jewel of a daughter hath been won by Arjuna. This, O king, is the rule with us, to ever enjoy equally a jewel that we may obtain. O best of monarchs, that rule of conduct we cannot now abandon. Krishna, therefore, shall become the wedded wife of us all. Let her take our hands, one after another, before the fire. Drupada answered, O scion of Kuru's race, it hath been directed that one man may have many wives. But it hath never been heard that one woman may have many husbands. O son of Kunti, as thou art pure and acquainted with the rules of morality, it behoveth thee not to commit an act that is sinful and opposed both to usage and the Vedas. Why, O prince, hath thy understanding become so? Yudhishthira said in reply, O monarch, morality is subtle. We do not know its course. Let us follow the way trodden by the illustrious ones of former ages. My tongue never uttered an untruth. My heart also never turneth to what is sinful. My mother commendeth so, and my heart also approveth of it. Therefore, O king, that is quite conformable to virtue. Act according to it, without any scruples. Entertain no fear, O king, about this matter. Drupada said, O son of Kunti thy mother, and my son Drishtadyumna and thyself, settle amongst yourselves as to what should be done. Tell me the result of your deliberations, and tomorrow I will do what is proper. Vysampayana continued, After this, O Bharata, Yudhishthira, Kunti and Drishtadyumna discoursed upon this matter. Just at that time, however, the island-born Vyasa, O monarch, came there in course of his wanderings. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 198. Vysampayana said, Then all the Pandavas and the illustrious king of the Panchalas and all others there present stood up and saluted with reverence the illustrious Rishi Krishna, Dvapayana. The high-souled Rishi, saluting them in return and inquiring after their welfare, sat down on a carpet of gold. And commanded by Krishna, Dvapayana, of immeasurable energy, those foremost of men all sat down on costly seats. A little after, O monarch, the son of Prashada in sweet accents asked the illustrious Rishi about the wedding of his daughter. And he said, How, O illustrious one, can one woman become the wife of many men without being defiled by sin? Oh, tell me truly all about this. Hearing these words, Vyasa replied, This practice, O king, being opposed to usage and the Vedas, hath become obsolete. I desire, however, to hear what the opinion of each of you is upon this matter. Hearing these words of the Rishi, Drupada spoke first, saying, The practice is sinful in my opinion, being opposed to both usage and the Vedas. O best of Brahmanas, nowhere have I seen many men having one wife. The illustrious ones also of former ages never had such a usage amongst them. The wise should never commit a sin. I, therefore, can never make up mind to act in this way. This practice always appeareth to me to be of doubtful morality. After Drupada had ceased, Drishtadyumna spoke, saying, O bull amongst Brahmanas, O thou of ascetic wealth, how can, O Brahmana, the elder brother, if he is of a good disposition, approach the wife of his younger brother? The ways of morality are ever subtle, and, therefore, we know them not. We cannot, therefore, say what is conformable to morality and what not. We cannot do such a deed, therefore, with a safe conscience. Indeed, O Brahmana, I cannot say, Let Draupadi become the common wife of 5 brothers. Yudhishthira then spoke, saying, My tongue never uttereth an untruth, and my heart never inclineth to what is sinful. When my heart approveth of it, it can never be sinful. I have heard in the Purana that a lady of name Jadala, the foremost of all virtuous women belonging to the race of Gautama, had married 7 rishis. So also an ascetic's daughter, born of a tree, had in former times united herself in marriage with 10 brothers, all bearing the same name of Purusharthas, and who were all of souls exalted by asceticism. O foremost of all that are acquainted with the rules of morality, it is said that obedience to superior is ever meritorious. Amongst all superiors, it is well known that the mother is the foremost. Even she hath commanded us to enjoy Draupadi as we do anything obtained as alms. It is for this, O best of Brahmanas, that I regard the proposed act as virtuous. Kunti then said, The act is even so as the virtuous Yudhishthira hath said. I greatly fear, O Brahmana, lest my speech should become untrue. How shall I be saved from untruth? When they had all finished speaking, Vyasa said, O amiable one, how shall thou be saved from the consequence of untruth? Even this is eternal virtue. I will not, O king of the Panchalas, discourse on this before you all. But thou alone shalt listen to me when I disclose how this practice hath been established and why it is to be regarded as old and eternal. There is no doubt that what Yudhishthira hath said is quite conformable to virtue. Vysampayana continued, Then the illustrious Vyasa the master Dwapayana rose, and taking hold of Drupada's hand led him to a private apartment. The Pandavas and Kunti and Drishtadyumna of Prashada's race sat there, waiting for the return of Vyasa and Drupada. Meanwhile, Dwapayana began his discourse with illustrious monarch for explaining how the practice of polyandry could not be regarded as sinful. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 199. Vysampayana said, Vyasa continued, In days of yore, the celestials had once commenced a grand sacrifice in the forest of Naimisha. At that sacrifice, O king, Yama, the son of Vivasvat, became the slayer of the devoted animals. Yama, thus employed in that sacrifice, did not, during that period, O king, kill a single human being. Death being suspended in the world, the number of human beings increased very greatly. Then Soma and Sakra and Varuna and Kuvara, the Sathyas, the Rudras, the Vasus, the twin Ashwins, these and other celestials went unto Prajapati, the creator of the universe. Struck with fear for the increase of the human population of the world, they addressed the master of creation and said, Alarmed, O Lord, at the increase of human beings on earth, we come to thee for relief. Indeed, we crave thy protection. Hearing those words, the grandsire said, Ye have little cause to be frightened at this increase of human beings. Ye all are immortal. It behoveth you not to take fright at human beings. The celestials replied, The mortals have all become immortal. There is no distinction now between us and them. Vexed at the disappearance of all distinction, we have come to thee in order that thou mayest distinguish us from them. The Creator then said, The son of Vivasvat is even now engaged in the grand sacrifice. It is for this that men are not dying. But when Yama's work in connection with the sacrifice terminates, men will again begin to die as before. Strengthened by your respective energies, Yama will, when that time comes, sweep away by thousands the inhabitants on earth who will scarcely have then any energy left in them. Vyasa continued, Hearing these words of the firstborn deity, the celestials returned to the spot where the grand sacrifice was being performed. And the mighty one sitting by the side of the Bhagirathi saw a golden lotus being carried along by the current. And beholding that golden lotus, they wondered much. And amongst them, that foremost of celestials, viz., Indra, desirous of ascertaining whence it came, proceeded up along the course of the Bhagirathi. And reaching that spot whence the goddess Ganga issues perennially, Indra beheld a woman possessing the splendor of fire. The woman who had come there to take water was washing herself in the stream, weeping all the while. The teardrops she shed, falling on the stream, were being transformed into golden lotuses. The wielder of the thunderbolt, beholding that wonderful sight, approached the woman and asked her, Who art thou, amiable lady? Why dost thou weep? I desire to know the truth. Oh, tell me everything. Vyasa continued. The woman thereupon answered, O Sakra, thou mayest know who I am and why, unfortunate that I am, I weep, if only, O chief of the celestials, thou comest with me as I lead the way. Thou shalt then see what it is I weep for. Hearing these words of the lady, Indra followed her as she led the way. And soon he saw, not far off from where he was, a handsome youth with a young lady seated on a throne placed on one of the peaks of Himavat and playing at dice. Beholding that youth, the thief of the celestials said, Know, intelligent youth, that this universe is under my sway. Seeing, however, that the person addressed was so engrossed in dice that he took no notice of what he said, Indra was possessed by anger and repeated, I am the Lord of the universe. The youth, who was none else than the god Mahadeva, the god of the gods, seeing Indra filled with wrath, only smiled, having cast a glance at him. At that glance, however, the chief of the celestials was at once paralyzed and stood there like a stake. When the game at dice was over, Isana, addressing the weeping woman, said, Bring Sakra hither, for I shall soon so deal with him that pride may not again enter his heart. As soon as Sakra was touched by that woman, the chief of the Celestials, with limbs paralyzed by that touch, fell down on the earth. The illustrious Isana of fierce energy then said unto him, Act not, O Sakra, ever again in this way. Remove this huge stone, for thy strength and energy are immeasurable, and enter the hole, it will disclose, where await some others possessing the splendor of the sun, and who are all like unto thee. Indra, then, on removing that stone, beheld a cave in the breast of that king of mountains, within which were 4 others resembling himself. Beholding their plight, Sakra became seized with grief and exclaimed, Shall I be even like these? Then the god Girisha, looking full at Indra with expanded eyes, said in anger, O thou of 100 sacrifices, enter this cave without loss of time, for thou hast from folly insulted me. Thus addressed by the Lord Isana, the chief of the Celestials, in consequence of that terrible imprecation, was deeply pained, and with limbs weakened by fear trembled like the wind-shaken leaf of a Himalayan figure. And cursed unexpectedly by the god owning a bull for his vehicle, Indra, with joined hands and shaking from head to foot, addressed that fierce god of multiform manifestations, saving, Thou art, O Bhava, the overlooker of the infinite universe. Hearing these words, the god of fiery energy smiled and said, Those that are of disposition like thine never obtain my grace. These others, within the cave, had at one time been like thee. Enter thou this cave, therefore, and lie there for some time. The fate of you all shall certainly be the same. All of you shall have to take your birth in the world of men, where, having achieved many difficult feats and slaying a large number of men, ye shall again, by the merits of your respective deeds, regain the valued region of Indra. Ye shall accomplish all I have said and much more besides, of other kinds of work. Then those Indras, of their shorn glory, said, We shall go from our celestial regions even unto the region of men, where salvation is ordained to be difficult of acquisition. But let the gods Dharma, Vayu, Maghavat, and the twin Ashwins beget us upon our would-be mother. Fighting with men by means of both celestial and human weapons, we shall again come back into the region of Indra. Vyasa continued, hearing these words of the former Indras, the wielder of the thunderbolt once more addressed that foremost of gods, saying, Instead of going myself, I shall, with a portion of my energy, create from myself a person for the accomplishment of the task thou assignest, to form the 5th among these. Vishwabhuk, Butadaman, Sivi of great energy, Santi the 4th, and Tejasvin, these it is said were the 5 Indras of old. And the illustrious god of the formidable bow, from his kindness, granted unto the 5 Indras the desires they cherished. And he also appointed that woman of extraordinary beauty, who was none else than celestial Shri, goddess of grace, herself, to be their common wife in the world of men. Accompanied by all those Indras, the god Isana then went unto Narayana of immeasurable energy, the infinite, the immaterial, the uncreate, the old, the eternal, and the spirit of these universes without limits. Narayana approved of everything. Those Indras then were born in the world of men. And Hari, Narayana, took up 2 hairs from his body, one of which hairs was black and the other white. And those 2 hairs entered the wombs of 2 of the Ida race, by name Devki and Rohini. And one of these hairs, viz., that which was white, became Valadeva. And the hair that was black was born as Kesava's self, Krishna. And those Indras of old who had been confined in the cave on the Himavat are none else than the sons of Pandu, endued with great energy. And Arjuna amongst the Pandavas, called also Savyasakan, using both hands with equal dexterity, is a portion of Sakra. Vyasa continued, Thus, O king, they who have been born as the Pandavas are none else than those Indras of old. And the celestial Shri herself who had been appointed as their wife is this Draupadi of extraordinary beauty. How could she whose effulgence is like that of the sun or the moon, whose fragrance spreads for 2 miles around, take her birth in any other than an extraordinary way, viz., from within the earth, by virtue of the sacrificial rites? Unto thee, O king, I cheerfully grant this other boon in the form of spiritual sight. Behold now the sons of Kunti endued with their sacred and celestial bodies of old. Vaisampayana continued, saying this, that sacred Brahmana Vyasa of generous deeds, by means of his ascetic power, granted celestial sight unto the king. Thereupon the king beheld all the Pandavas endued with their former bodies. And the king saw them possessed of celestial bodies, with golden crowns and celestial garlands, and each resembling Indra himself, with complexions radiant as fire or the sun, and decked with every ornament, and handsome, and youthful, with broad chests and statures measuring about 5 cubits. Endued with every accomplishment, and decked with celestial robes of great beauty and fragrant garlands of excellent making, the king beheld them as so many three-eyed gods, Mahadeva, or Vasus, or Rudras, or Adityas themselves. And observing the Pandavas in the forms of those Indras of old, and Arjuna also in the form of Indra sprung from Sakra himself, King Drupada was highly pleased. And the monarch wondered much on beholding that manifestation of celestial power under deep disguise. The king, looking at his daughter, that foremost of women, endued with great beauty, like unto a celestial damsel and possessed of the splendor of fire or the moon, regarded her as the worthy wife of those celestial beings, for her beauty, splendor, and fame. And beholding that wonderful sight, the monarch touched the feet of Satyavati's son, exclaiming, "O great Rishi, nothing is miraculous in thee." The Rishi then cheerfully continued, "In a certain hermitage there was an illustrious Rishi's daughter, who, though handsome and chaste, obtained not a husband. The maiden gratified, by severe ascetic penances, the god Sankara, Mahadeva. The lord Sankara, gratified at her penances, told her himself. Ask thou the boon thou desirest. Thus addressed, the maiden repeatedly said unto the boon-giving Supreme Lord, I desire to obtain a husband possessed of every accomplishment. Sankara, the chief of the gods, gratified with her, gave her the boon she asked, saying, Thou shalt have, amiable maiden, 5 husbands. The maiden, who had succeeded in gratifying the god, said again, O Sankara, I desire to have from thee only 1 husband possessed of every virtue. The god of gods, well pleased with her, spake again, saying, Thou hast, O maiden, addressed me 5 full times, repeating, Give me a husband. Therefore, O amiable one, it shall even be as thou hast asked. Blessed be thou. All this, however, will happen in a future life of thine. Vyasa continued, O Drupada, this thy daughter of celestial beauty is that maiden. Indeed, the faultless Krishna sprung from Prashada's race hath been preordained to become the common wife of 5 husbands. The celestial Shri, having undergone severe ascetic penances, hath, for the sake of the Pandavas, had her birth as thy daughter, in the course of thy grand sacrifice. That handsome goddess, waited upon by all the celestials, as a consequence of her own acts becomes the common wife of 5 husbands. It is for this that the Self-Create had created her. Having listened to all this, O King Drupada, do what thou desirest. Mahabharata, Book 1, Section 200. Vyasa said, Drupada, on hearing this, observed, O great Rishi, it was only when I had not heard this from thee that I had sought to act in the way I told thee of. Now, however, that I know all, I cannot be indifferent to what hath been ordained by the gods. Therefore do I resolve to accomplish what thou hast said. The knot of destiny cannot be untied. Nothing in this world is the result of our own acts. That which had been appointed by us in view of securing one only bridegroom hath now terminated in favor of many. As Krishna, in a former life, had repeatedly said, Oh, give me a husband, the great God himself even gave her the boon she had asked. The God himself knows the right or wrong of this. As regards myself, when Sankara hath ordained so, right or wrong, no sin can attach to me. Let these with happy hearts take, as ordained, the hand of Krishna with the rights. Vyasa continued, then the illustrious Vyasa, addressing Yudhishthira the just, said, This day is an auspicious day, O son of Pandu. This day the moon has entered the constellation called Pushya. Take thou the hand of Krishna today, thyself first before thy brothers. When Vyasa had said so, King Yajnasena and his son made preparations for the wedding. And the monarch kept ready various costly articles as marriage presents. Then he brought out his daughter Krishna, decked, after a bath, with many jewels and pearls. Then there came to witness the wedding all the friends and relatives of the king, ministers of state, and many brahmanas and citizens. And they all took their seats according to their respective ranks. Adorned with that concourse of principal men, with its yard decked with lotuses and lilies scattered thereupon, and beautified with lines of troops, King Drupada's palace, festooned around with diamonds and precious stones, looked like the firmament studded with brilliant stars. Then those princes of the Kuru line, endued with youth and adorned with earrings, attired in costly robes and perfumed with sandal paste, bathed and performed the usual religious rites and accompanied by their priest Daumya, who was possessed of the splendor of fire, entered the wedding hall one after another in due order, and with glad hearts, like mighty bulls entering a cow pen. Then Daumya, well conversant with the Vedas, igniting the sacred fire, poured with due mantras libations of clarified butter into that blazing element. And calling Yudhishthira there, Daumya, acquainted with mantras, united him with Krishna. Walking round the fire, the bridegroom and the bride took each other's hand. After their union was complete, the priest Daumya, taking leave of Yudhishthira, that ornament of battles, went out of the palace. Then those mighty car warriors, those perpetuators of the Kuru line, those princes attired in gorgeous dresses, took the hand of that best of women, day by day in succession, aided by that priest. O king, the celestial Rishi told me of a very wonderful and extraordinary thing in connection with these marriages, viz., that the illustrious princess of slender waist regained her virginity every day after a previous marriage. After the weddings were over, King Drupada gave unto those mighty car warriors diverse kinds of excellent wealth. And the king gave unto them 100 cars with golden standards, each drawn by 4 steeds with golden bridles. And he gave them 100 elephants, all possessing auspicious marks on their temples and faces, and like unto 100 mountains with golden peaks. He also gave them 100 female servants, all in the prime of youth, and clad in costly robes and ornaments and floral wreaths. And the illustrious monarch of the lunar race gave unto each of those princes of celestial beauty, making the sacred fire a witness of his gifts, much wealth and many costly robes and ornaments of great splendor. The sons of Pandu, endued with great strength, after their wedding were over, and after they had obtained Krishna like unto a second Sri along with great wealth, passed their days in joy and happiness, like so many Indras, in the capital of the king of the Panchalas. Present you by HinduMonastery.com.